Good evening. Welcome to this evening's City Council meeting. Our mayor has the stomach flu, so he has chosen to stay home. We're grateful for that, and we hope he gets better soon. I'm calling the meeting to order. We're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Mike Colomere.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now, Bob, if you would do the prayer.
Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you tonight and we just thank you for all of the grace that you extend to each one of us here and the blessings that you give to us as a body, as a city, as a state, and as a country, Lord. And we know that all things come from you, Lord, and we know that with that grace, every day is better for each and every one of us, Lord. But we also know there's struggles out there for this country and the state and the city. From time to time, we ask that you be with our leaders in all those areas, Lord, and that you give us wisdom, that you give us level thinking, Lord, and that you allow us to make decisions that are best for our citizens and for all the people involved, Lord. We just ask a special prayer for all of those families and students who were affected in Florida, Lord. We know that you have the big picture in mind, and the plan is in your hands, Lord. And sometimes we question why these things happen, Lord, and we just know that that it is in your hands, and that we just ask that you give all those people involved, that you give them comfort, you give them peace, and Lord, that you protect our children all over the country, that you protect all of our citizens, and that you especially protect those children. Lord, we also thank you for the first responders and all the people that go every day to put their lives on the line for the freedoms that we experience and share every day, and we're just grateful for that, Lord. It's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.
Thank you. Now we have citizens to be heard. Bill, is there a list? Thank you. First person would be Dagny Florine. Please state your name and address.
Ooh, this doesn't look like it should be here. Whose is this? Dagny Florine, 111 Post Oak Way. This morning I was coming home from a very nice hike in Eisenhower, and I turned right on De Zavala off Northwest Military. I saw some very heavy equipment and you need to start the timer, and a number of individuals ripping out trees. Our city manager was there speaking with them, so I did a U-turn, came back, parked in the parking lot out here, and after noticing the center island is a mess, so clearly that's not being taken care of, I noticed the city manager had walked deeper into the Muni tract, so I went over there. And to my dismay, in addition to a lot of trees being taken out on De Zavala, there were 6 guys with chainsaws taking out more trees deep into the Muni tract. Now, I know we're supposed to be Tree City, USA. Somehow it escapes me that everywhere I look, more and more trees are being taken out. We're supposedly going for a national wildlife certification. That municipal tract is the last stand for the wild animals in this area, because everything around here is being developed, as we will see tonight when the developers present more cutting that they're going to do in order to put more development in place. So, in speaking with the city manager and a couple of the guys with the big chainsaws, I mentioned that there's a problem with cutting all that land out there, cutting all the trees, because 95% of all fires, wildfires, are caused by man. They're not caused by nature. And so you open it up out there, and you're going to possibly have more fires than you might have had you left it alone, because there'll be more people encouraged to go in there. I might also add that the road that goes into the Muni tract up to the Trinity Well is, no surprise because of the rain, a muddy mess. And so there's going to be more time, effort, and probably trees taken down in order to mulch that road, until at some point somebody's probably going to propose, let's just put asphalt or concrete in there and be done with it. That place, the Muni tract, is the last stand for the wild animals in this area, And we're losing it inch by inch, foot by foot, tree by tree. And when those trees are gone, they're just not going to come back, at least not in any of our lifetimes. Some on council used to be in favor of supporting the animals and being a voice for animals, but apparently that's not the case anymore. You get on council and I guess you change your mind. So anyway, I would strongly encourage you, please, did council actually vote on everything that's being done out there? Because if you go out there, it's pretty appalling, and I would encourage everyone here and everyone who listens to this on the video, go take a look at how many trees they've taken out and how deep into the Muni tract they are. That Muni tract is not a big piece of land, it's a small piece of land, and it's getting smaller by the minute because you can start seeing all the way over to the Trinity Well just from where they have finished, hopefully, the cutting that they did today. It's really sad. So much for Tree City USA and whatever wildlife certification we might get. Thank you.
Thank you, Dagny. David Pierce.
Good evening, council members. I'm
Please
up
state
here.
your address.
Pardon?
Please state your address.
118 Fawn.
Thank you.
I'm up here because as the vice chair of the tree committee, I received several calls today about what was going on along De Zavala. And I went out there and met with Mr. Hill actually, and to try to find out what was going on. And I know as a member of the tree committee, we had the good fortune of having Chief Naughton explain about the shaded fuel break, which we agreed to, but apparently the clearing along De Zavala was not something. It was brought to us after the fact that it was already, I guess, approved. I don't remember it being that part of it being approved, but I guess it was. So the other thing is the shaded fuel break is being paid for off a grant, and this is being paid for with Shavano Park taxpayer money. So and the other deal is that the reason the Forest Service did not want to clear along De Zavala is because they already deemed it as a fire break. It was already a fire break there, you know, because of the road. So anyway, and I have another little deal. I have, just personally, at Fawn and Military, there's the house right across the street, and a lot of their branches are growing out into Fawn, and if another car is approaching, you can't help but scrape your own vehicle on those branches. They're sticking out right on the road, you know. So that's something that just personally I would like to see done. And the other thing is that the survey monkey that's been going out lately, it seems as though those questions are sort of biased, and there aren't any answers. There's no right answer. Well, every answer is a right answer for certain people, but there's no real clear choices when you read the survey monkey. So I think we need another type of survey, and another survey written that doesn't seem so biased, where you have clear-cut choices. So that's just my opinion on that. Anyway, thank you for your time.
Thanks, David.
And next, Janice Schwab. Please state your address and name.
Janice Schwab, 119 Longbow. I agree completely with what y'all said. You go. Tree USA is an oxymoron around here. Anyway, I came tonight to say how sorry I am to learn that Mary Ann is not going to seek re-election for council seat. We have lost a true advocate for the voice of Shavano Park citizens. Not necessarily what's best, what you think is best for us, but what we actually want. And Mary Ann always did that. I appreciate Mary Ann for giving us 4 years of outstanding service. She actually kept her campaign promise to provide complete transparency regarding the business of the city council meetings. She's the only council member in my 24 years of living here that took the time to send monthly reports about the council meetings, which included the links to the YouTube videos of the meeting, links to city ordinances, links to city maps, surveys, and charts, and a summary of the discussion and decisions made at each meeting. And for me, these videos, or rather these links, were invaluable since I'm not always able to navigate the Shavano Park website to find this information. Being old and not so good at technology. Anyway, she always included her vote on each issue, how she voted, and then she included the reasoning she used to make that judgment, which invariably was based on her philosophy that her job was to represent the voice of the citizens, not what's best for the citizens, but the voice of the citizens. Never did I sense a personal agenda underlying her decisions, which is a rarity. So often Mary Ann was a single vote in favor of an issue that would directly impact the citizens favorably. She held strong to her principles and her promises. Thank you, Mary Ann, for all you have done for Shavano Park. I wish you would run again.
Thank you. And now A.D. Smoot. Please give your address.
A.D. Smoot, 101 Shavano Drive. I, too, am a member of the tree committee. Today, I received over 400 phone calls, emails, and text messages concerning the clearing out here. Some of you will understand that a few days on down the line. And I don't recall, like Dave said, that anything was ever said about that in a tree committee meeting. And I don't recall anything ever being voted on concerning that in a council meeting. I just want to remind you today that unlike the rancher cattle barons of old, that the council and the mayor of this great city of ours, Shavano Park, the city does not belong, it's not yours, and it's not just for you, it's for we, the citizens. The city belongs to us too. I just want to remind you about that. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes citizens to be heard. City council comments. Start with you, Mike.
Thank you for coming out. Thank you for keeping us accountable. Keep coming and telling us what you want us to do so that we can do it. And I echo Bob's prayers for the families in Broward County affected by the shooting. Evil is out there, and the primary responsibility of government is to restrain evil.
Thank you. Bob.
Thank you for being here tonight. It's a good crowd, and we appreciate all your input and your feedback. We do listen. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Ann.
Good evening. Thanks so much for coming out. Ms. Schwab, thank you so much for those comments. I appreciate that.
Mike.
Good evening, and I as well would like to express the deepest sympathies for the people in Florida for that tragic event. Thank you for coming, and good evening.
Thank you. Item number 5 is presentations, commendations, and announcements. And Rondi, would you like to come up and give an announcement?
As a member of the tree committee, I want to invite everybody to the Arbor Day, Earth Day celebration. It's going to be Saturday, April 21st, from 10 to 2 p.m. Our theme this year is birds of prey, raptors. I'm going to go over just a few of the fun things that we're going to have for everybody. And as P.T. Barnum once said, come on out. It's from age 1 to 91. Actually, we can go to 101 now. Our most fun thing I think that we're going to have is Last Chance Forever, which is a rehab group of people that have been around forever. They are licensed by the federal government to rehab all kinds of raptors like bald eagles, etc. They're going to be here giving a demonstration. They will have their different kinds of raptors that are here. They will explain to people what's happening and what they are. They'll also be giving a speech here inside during the day. We've got several kids' crafts that we're going to do. There'll be food and drink vendors. The fire department is going to have some good stuff for the kiddos. There's going to be a bouncy house that deals with fire safety. The Women's Club will be selling herbs, and they will have a knife sharpener here. So don't forget to bring your knives and your garden tools. There is a slight fee, but he does a really good job. Finally, last year, I remembered to bring my knives to get them sharpened. There's going to be a poster contest like we've been having with Blattman. Document shredding, you're allowed, I think, to bring 2 bags of documents to be shredded, and that's for free. If you have any electronics that you need to get rid of, there's going to be collection for electronics. We've got some nice door prizes. There'll be face painting. And last year, I even saw some of the firemen getting their faces painted, so you don't have to be a kid to have fun. They're going to have pony rides. We will have a costume contest, and you're going to have to read the April Roadrunner to find out more about that. One thing that I do want to ask our citizens is we're still looking for people that may have a business, especially Shavano Park residents that may want to have a booth, something to deal with Earth Day, Arbor Day. Let Bill Hill or myself know if you're interested in having a booth. There's no charge. You get your product, your information out to the public by having a booth here. So I want to see everybody here on April. And we're more important than anything that's going on downtown that deals with Fiesta. Forget Fiesta that day. It's Earth Day, it's Shavano Park Fun Day, so y'all come.
Thank you. Regular agenda items, 6.1, discussion possible action authorizing the city manager to extend an offer of employment to Brenda Morey for the position of finance director, possible executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.074, personnel matters. Bill.
Good evening, council and citizens here. So I'm pleased to be able to bring before you tonight candidate for our new finance director, Brenda Morey. In terms of background, Laura Fegans has resigned to go pursue something else or whatever she wants to do. I will tell you that we've had that ongoing action for a little bit over a month. City advertised the job in several places, TML, ZipRecruiter, as well as word of mouth through the various cities, et cetera. We received over 50 applications. Frankly, most of those were from ZipRecruiter. I learned a lot about ZipRecruiter. You get a lot of applications, and I'll just leave it at that. But there were some qualified candidates from ZipRecruiter we did screen and we did interview. We interviewed over 6 candidates. We also utilized the firm Robert Half, who has connections, and they have people that apply through them, and they have a team. There's an accounting team that sought, and they presented us 2 applicants that we interviewed, as well as presented others that we did not interview. Ultimately, and Zena and I were part of the we were the selection committee ourselves, and we selected Brenda Morey as our candidate to bring for you. We did not create a selection matrix that scores everything. I'll just tell you there was a lot of qualified candidates. Primarily when I'm looking for a hire, I'm looking for the ability to operate within our team, and I'm looking for potential. I'm not going to hire necessarily the most qualified in terms of total skill sets. I'm looking for potential, what will be best fit for the city, and by far Brenda Morey fits that description out of all the candidates we had. In fact, we interviewed her and we stopped interviewing at that point in time. That's how strongly we feel about that. She comes to us. She was a CPA from Wisconsin. She and her husband and family moved down to Texas a number of years ago. She did not maintain her CPA certification here in Texas, but she has been doing accounting work through that time. She has a strong audit background. Her resume is, as well as the job applications in your packet. I will tell you that her most recent employment, in which she is still employed, and she will be leaving that employment here at the end of the first week of March, is with the Beer Bulverde Volunteer Fire Department, where she works most time. It's part-time, but it's about 30 hours a week, and she's responsible for all the public accounting associated with that. So With that, the action before you is to approve the request of the candidate as proposed. There is a financial impact in terms of all employment. And I'll just kind of mention that the salary range is set by the salary survey at $65,754 to a range of $95,343. I provided the resume to Steve Whirling, who is our consultant associated with that, based upon the experience that she has used and gained in her experience, which she has many years of experience in accounting, but they really count as indirect experience. The salary that we've agreed to offer her is $73,777 as a start, and then that will, again, continue to go up as forward. So, again, we're asking for your approval of my recommendation for Brenda Morey as the finance director. And subject to your questions, I'll be glad to take any at this time.
Can I take a motion?
I would move we authorize the city manager to extend an offer of employment for the position of finance director to Brenda Morey.
Second. Open for discussion. Mike?
I think the city manager needs to hire the folks that he can work with, and then we'll hold him accountable for how that work gets done, so have at it.
Thank you.
Bob?
I spoke about this earlier, but I wanted you to kind of make it accessible to the citizens and the rest of the people about, one of the concerns is the in-code experience or lack thereof. And you presented some scenarios to me that I was very satisfied with. That has become such an important part of this position. Laura obviously did a very good job, so can you kind of expand on that?
I'll be glad to. And for those around that have been around for a while, and I'm talking about 5 years ago, our situation in terms of bookkeeping and finances were not what they are now. We were very fortunate. We got the right person at the right time with Laura Fegans coming in here, and unequivocally, I say she did a fantastic job. She's an attention to detail person, which has taken our budget process and our monthly reconciliations to a new level. So we are basically operating on all cylinders, and we're doing very, very well. So new finance director has to come in and maintain that. A big part of that is in-code, and that was part of the problem with the previous regime associated with that. In terms of the transition plan, Brenda is quite experienced in accounting, reconciliation, payroll, all the things that we do. She's used different software. I've discussed this with a number of people that have experience with finance directors, and in-code is an important task to learn. It's a task that can be learned relatively easy. It'll take a while to do. What we've done to set Brenda up for success is a couple things. We have hired an interim finance director. So that finance director is Martha Kurtzy. She comes to us just having retired in December as the finance director of Athens, Texas. And she is quite familiar with in-code and all the functions associated with that. She's been on board for about 2 weeks now, a week and a half actually. She's part of the transition plan to coach and to mentor Brenda when she gets in here. Prior to Brenda coming on full-time on the 12th of March, which is her scheduled time, we have already scheduled 2 half-days of in-code training with a consultant that we have in San Antonio that specializes in in-code training. So he used to do this for in-code. I don't have the specifics of this, but if you actually send someone to an in-code class, it's very, very expensive. This we'll be able to do locally here. And we're hoping to also tie in Jessica, our AP clerk, and as it's appropriate to get a few more people working into that scenario. So we have him in our hip pocket. We'll do a transition after the 12th of March with Martha and Brenda. And then we have the opportunity, I've already talked to Martha about as appropriate and the comfort level, and I'll let them gauge that. 2 weeks later, come back for 3 days, or a month later, come back for 3 days to kind of, just to kind of answer questions and so forth. But talking with Brenda, she appears to be a fast learner. I don't have any concerns on this. Everyone has to enter into this government accounting and in-code at some point in time in their career, and this is the start. And she comes from a place where she doesn't have to fix anything, she has to maintain it. We have stable court clerk, permanent clerk, utility clerk, and accounts payable clerk that should do all, a lot of the nug work associated with the daily transactions.
I don't have any questions. If the CEO wants to hire someone, I support that decision, and we grade accordingly.
Mike?
I agree. Bill's done very well for us on his hires. I see no reason to doubt his word on this.
Without any further ado, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion carries. 6.2, reapproval of the final plat establishing Shavano Park Unit 19C, Phase 4, Huntington, a 32.86 acre tract of land out of the 289.5 acre tract described in deed to Rogers Shavano Park Unit 1819 Limited.
I have Laddie here, but Laddie, I'll do the background, and then you can come up and talk specifics of what you're really trying to do. I just want to kind of, you got your staff summary sheet, which outlines all this, but for the audience and the citizens that are here, I'll just kind of back brief a little bit. This plat has already been addressed through the planning and zoning and through the council, through the preliminary plat process and the final plat process. As typically a lot of landowners will do, and developers specifically, they will maintain and hold that plat and not file it until they get ready to go to closure, which is what's happened. And then sometimes during closure, there are specific things that need to be adjusted, or in this case, before they actually break ground or they actually do things. So just to remind you there, this plat was approved finally in August 9th by the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then was subsequently in August approved by the City Council. We've done this before. I've conferred with the lawyers. There's some minor changes that the developer wants to do, and so what we are going to do is treat this as if it was resubmitting the final plat, and he has done that. So he has provided us a formal letter. The red line changes to the plat. I'll let him describe that, and you'll see his justification in a moment. And then this has gone through the Planning and Zoning Commission. They actually reviewed this on the 7th of February. They recommended reapproval of the final plat. I will make note that no special notice or hearing is required other than posting it on the agenda. And this is really just a reapproval of something that's already been done with a minor change. So you have a couple of options. It is to reapprove the plat with red line changes or provide further guidance to staff or questions associated with that. So with that, Laddie, if you want to come up and kind of explain what you have, I think we have a diagram here which kind of shows what it is we're trying to do, or you're trying to do. Okay.
How you doing? Taylor Dryce with Pick Dawson Engineers. As Mr. Hill stated, this plat has been approved. The reason for a reapproval is you can see this intersection up on the screen. When we stake the center line for this street to begin construction, we noticed that the alignment of the street that kind of bends and heads towards the east was aiming for a large group of oak trees, and that would be in the next unit. So at the developer's request, we changed this intersection and brought that street farther down to avoid a group of oak trees. So those will now be saved within the next unit. You could see the red line on the lots. That's simple, just lot acreage that needed to be updated with the change in the right-of-way. Also, the preamble was updated for the change in acreage. Really, that is the major change that happened in this plat, was just realigning that street to avoid oak trees.
Thank you. You're done too, Bill?
Yeah.
Would anybody submit a motion?
I would move that we do the reapproval for the final plat establishing Shavano Park Unit 19C, Phase 1-4, Huntington, a 32.86 acre tract of land out of that 289.5 acre tract described in deed to Rogers Shavano Park Unit 1819 Limited, with the red line changes.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any other comments? Concerns? Call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Same sign for opposed. The motion carries. Item 6.3, are we doing 6.3 this evening?
Mayor Pro Tem, we are not.
Okay.
We were waiting on an action that did not come through, so we're pulling that, and we'll bring it back when appropriate.
Okay, moving on to 6.4, presentation, discussion, semi-annual presentation by Bitter Blue Inc., Denton Communities regarding residential and commercial development in Shavano Park and surrounding areas, and discussion concerning the same. I'm not sure who's up first. Oh, Daryl and Laddie, thank you.
Again, just back and forth, and like here, you have a mouse, so you can hit play, you can pause it, and go, do what you need. Okay, so it won't be quite as awkward as in P and Z. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Good evening, council members. Daryl Lang with Bitter Blue, representing our commercial property.
Laddie Denton with Bitter Blue.
See here. Let's see if we do this right here. Curtis, what? Are we doing the drone first?
Yeah, do the drone first.
Okay, there it is.
We're using a drone this time, which we use quite a bit now. And you're going west on 1604. On your left is the frontage in Inwood and the series of office buildings that have built there. You can pause in a minute.
Speak loudly into the mic, please.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm gonna move over here.
On the left, we just went by it, but there's a wholesale lighting company going in and a new building which will be under construction, or is under construction,
Probably about a year.
about a year from now. And it is a retail lighting place with that also sells to builders and so forth. Okay, we're going over Salado Creek. Just a couple of things on Salado Creek, and go ahead and pause it for a second. Oh, he does.
Curtis, is it?
That might be good.
I'm not touching anything.
He's a millennial.
Okay, on Salado Creek, we've been working with the city north of 1604 for about, 5 years actually. And over the last 2 years, we've been working to finish where the location of the Greenway Trail going north, which would loop all the way around the Marietta quarries and hit Eisenhower Park. We just recently have identified the location of that trail and staked it, and the city has reviewed it. And we have cleared it. We finished clearing it last week, and the city is intending to start construction north of 1604 in the fall of this year. Their intention was also to start this year south of 1604 on the section between Huebner and 1604. I don't know what the status of that is currently, but we will be moving north of 1604, and it's working out very, very well.
And when you say city, you mean San Antonio?
Yes, San Antonio. Okay, on your left there, or on the south, is Napier Park. To your right is the Ridgeline Apartments, which are complete and leasing about 88% at this point. And there will coming up on the south, again, the vacant area is with the location of where Huntington East would be in the future. Huntington West is the office building directly in front of you. KFW is to the left there on the side. There'll be one additional building going in there. Could you hold it for a minute? Yeah, I'm covering both sides of 1604. We assumed you'd be interested in the entire corridor, which is the way we treat this area between really Bitters all the way to beyond Northwest Military as one single project, which we try to coordinate and bring together. On the right is a street called Happy's Round, which is a roundabout that provides a primary entrance into Ridge Line. And then farther west on the north side of 1604, that's an area of about 45 acres, backs up to our fronts on Salado Creek. And that is an area we'll probably start on in the next year or two. That will probably be a ridge line in phase 2 going up in that area on the back of the creek. And we're taking that very, very, very slowly. We also made arrangements with Texas Climbers Coalition and a nonprofit out of Washington State that they own and take responsibility for our climbing walls all over the country. We wanted to do something with Medicine Wall, and we're working with them that they would take over Medicine Wall and take over responsibility for it. Access would be only through the trail, the City of San Antonio's trail up Salado Creek, and they would be responsible for that. And it would take it out of our ownership, and we like to get it somewhere permanently where it's actually accessible in the future for some types of activities on the climbing. Okay. Huntington's on your, well, we're going to go into Ridgeline first. Just went over the roundabout, come into the Ridgeline. These are office sites to your right and to your left. Again, continuing down 1604. The 45 acres is on your right side or on the north side. This is just a quick shot into Huntington. We're very pleased with this community. We continue to move slowly, which is fine. Our housing prices are now starting at about $1.5 million to $2 million, and we're running up to several $1 million. It's, we'll be in here probably 5 to 6 more years. We're in the 4th unit currently under construction. Should finish in the summer, and there's 1 more unit in here. Again, continuing west, Paisanos on the south side. Coming up in Shavano Park with the 22 acres. We have no immediate plans for this area. We did some rezoning on it last year, and we're talking to a flex brew operation, and we're just, again, taking it slow. This is going up Shavano Ranch Road to the north, and way out in the north you can see the two Marietta quarries that were leases to Martin Marietta. And Shavano Highlands is in front of you and below you. Presidio is on your left over there. And there's a hilltop there directly in front of you. Marietta has moved out of the quarries, is back into the Beckman Quarry, and is moving west, blasting along the south side. So what you're feeling now is they're moving to the west, but they're on the south part of the quarry. Again, this is just going through Shavano Highlands. This is Medicine Wall. It's on the west side where Salado Creek makes a big bend. And it's about 80, 85 feet. And we've had a lot of trouble keeping people off of it. Again, you can see the quarries to the north. We just are working on a redevelopment plan for both quarries. That's been going on for like 7 years. Marietta is working with us in that regard. These are Waco wells. This is part of the Sauce water supply. You're going to Shavano Ranch Road all the way over to Northwest Military. Cornerstone's on your left. They're working on the high school portion of that campus. We were just amazed at how much stuff they got on that site. It's incredible. To your right over there, that's the south quarry of the Marietta quarries. And in front of you to the west is the Beckman quarry. Right now, Marietta is planning on being there about 20 to 25 more years. That is amazing. Going down west again. On your left is 22 acres.
Yeah. Take over.
Yeah.
We're approaching west now, and we're coming up to the former Frostbank pad site on your south side there. And Curtis, do you mind just pausing it for a moment right here? Just a good spot to pause. So you have the former Frostbank pad site, and that was purchased by a developer, and they're doing a retail / office, retail in the front, office on the back side to take advantage of the grade. And then we're coming right back up to it here. Almost. Perfect, right there, great. And then what you have 2 pads up on the frontage there, so just east of Starbucks, and that's where we have Whataburger under contract and Bill Miller under contract. Oh, great, thank you. Whataburger under contract there, and then Bill Miller adjacent to it. This area here, we're going through a planning exercise right now for a retail center. Could be 1 building, could be 2 buildings. We're just trying to, maximize, trying to, work with the contours there and seeing what might be the future there. But that'd be an owned project by the partnership group. Thanks, Curtis. And I believe there's another multifamily site going up behind Freetail up in that area. You can see Starbucks, McAllister's there. There is a pad adjacent to Starbucks. We're just holding that for right now. We're going to go a little bit further, Curtis. Curtis, could you stop it right there for a moment? Just pause. We have the Baptist here on the northwest corner of Northwest Military in 1604. There's a Shavano Park Tennis Club there. We are working with a Class A office user for a small 25,000 square foot 2-story office right where Pond Hill comes out and meets 1604. And then adjacent, we're making provisions to, protect that future restaurant site, dedicated drives and whatnot. So we still have plans to get a restaurant there, and we will succeed at that. Went back. And this 16 acres closed approximately 3 weeks ago. So that is closed to a retailer. I'm sure they'll be making an announcement soon. We still have a confidentiality clause I can't disclose, but they should be making an announcement soon there. So it's a full 16 acres. Okay, thank you, Curtis. That is the office site that we're talking about right there. This is the Pond Hill Retail. I'm sorry, that was the start. This is Starbucks there. And then on the other side is the Pond Hill Retail with local coffee, Park Dental, Soul Fitness, and Polished Nail Salon. Shavano Park Tennis Center. And those are the townhomes. Did you want to pause it and talk? Okay. And that's drone generation 1.
Awesome, thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Bob?
Well, we have the slide-based presentation after this. We want to give the drone just to give a overview of the entire corridor, and then I'm going to talk some specific. Mr. Denton's going to talk about some of the residential, and then I'll have slides on covering commercial.
Okay. Did anybody have questions on what we just saw? No. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
What's going in at the Antis site?
That is, so it was actually sold to a Huntington resident. And what's going in there, that's actually the Frost Pad site, the former Frost Pad site. So there's going to be retail in the front, could be restaurant, could be service, but retail in the front, and then the grade drops off in the back, And I believe they'll have a single or maybe two-story generally medical office in the back there. So believe it or not, that site had a lot of grade on it. So that's why retail in the front and then, medical in the back. So they're leasing that right now. Yeah. Okay, well, we'll go to the slides now. Okay. There's your.
It kept trying to pop up before.
Where's your pointer? Yep, right here. There you go.
Don't need it. All right, residential is pretty short. We only have the 3 communities left. We'll be out of Bentley Manor this year, totally sold out of Bentley Manor this year. All of the garden homes will be sold. Huntington, you can see we have the 1 unit under construction, and we have 1 unit after that, which comes up. The next unit 5 would come up around the school. Let me go to that. Okay, how do you switch those?
Do you need a slide?
Yeah. That's Bentley, and again, we'll be phasing out completely out of that, and the builders will be completely out. The phase 4 is what's under construction, again, finishing in the summer. Phase 5 is probably a good 2 years out, and that will be the last one, and we're probably going to sell out, as I said, 5 to 7 years to fully sell out of here. We run about 12 a year, something like that.
Which is impressive in that price point.
It's worked well. Pond Hill Garden Villas, we struggled trying to find this market, and we've got 39 units. 4 of them are under contract, and we're working on 4 other sales. Again, this was interesting in that we were paranoid coming out of the recession about finding the correct price point, about fitting in below Bentley Manor. We found that we probably dumbed the product down too much, and we're making that adjustment now because the price points are actually higher than what we anticipated. And that's residential.
Okay, moving on to commercial, really just going to give you just a little more granular detail on what we saw with the drone. I just wanted to focus Lock Hill Selma. A lot of development along Lock Hill Selma. We have remaining plus or minus 2 acres at the corner. You have De Zavala and Lock Hill. Really not a huge motivation. There's a lot of trees on that site, waiting for the right user that can really make that site, it's the entry to Shavano Park. So, trying to wait for the right user there. This is outside of City of Shavano Park, but wanted to show it. This is the approximate outline of a basis school. This is better, a little bit better. This is the general area of the basis school campus that is under development right now.
Use your pointer, please, if you could.
Pardon me. Right there. And then obviously the existing Walmart and the existing CVS. We are working with a dance studio it's tough to see this little sliver that wraps around CVS. It's kind of an interesting piece, so working with an established dance studio for a location there. And this piece, just FYI, we sold this to St. Sophia probably 6 years ago, 6 to 7 years ago. They're downstreaming that property, so that property is listed by another broker, and that is on the market. Now that's zoned O1 and O2, there. So that will be something at some point.
Does that have a deed restriction as a church?
No.
Okay.
No.
No, they're staying downtown or on St. Mary's.
So, this is moving up to Pond Hill. The Class A office that is under development right now, we're going to contract on it, about 26,000 square feet, extremely high-end Class A, and then our future proposed restaurant site. That's not going anywhere. This actually helps us. This gets all the utilities installed. It gets the water that we already have designed, the sanitary sewer, and it will have everything stubbed out ready for what we think will just be an absolute class, first-class restaurant site there. Just a brief rendering of what that office, is shaping up to take a look like. The Plat's remaining the same, no changes with the Plat, no changes with ingress, egress. This is just a close-up of the Pond Hill Retail. You have Soul Fitness, Polish, Park Hill Dental, and Local Coffee. This is the proposed site plan for where Whataburger there, Bill Miller, vacant pad next to Starbucks, and then this is a pad that's undergoing design right now to see how it might be for future retail. And then this is the area that we talked about, the former Frost site, with retail in the front, and then it drops down, office in the rear. 22-acre commercial site that we rezoned approximately 1 to 2 years ago, and we're just going through some design studies with Pape Dawson on this right now. Again, lines on a paper just could be, conceptual. What is pretty much fixed is that 30-foot private street. This area on 1604, due to grade separation and ingress-egress, this is pretty much the only spot where you're going to have an ingress-egress out onto 1604 access. Huntington Commercial, approximately 82% leased, doing very well. We have just some smaller spaces in this building right now. This is a good overview of this area. You'll be seeing this is the pad for a future Huntington East. Obviously, that's Huntington West with some of the tenants there. KFW Engineering, Bader House, and then this has been sold approximately 1 acre for a little Class A office building, probably 5,000 to 7,000 square feet there. Okay. Napier Park, everything is in. You have Jeff and Enterprises they are laying a foundation there for 2 buildings, and then we are marketing the rest here for small professional fee simple Class A office, smaller, about 4,000 to 6,000 square feet. A couple renderings, Napier Park. Inwood Commercial, this partnership is being closed out. This tract is under development, about 4.5 acres for about 75,000 square feet of office. And this is the area that Mr. Denton talked about that was sold to Lighting Inc. And they're a lighting distributor plus also retailer for lighting. This is across at Inwood, that's on the 4.5 acres. Just jumping north here, you saw this in the drone. This is more of a better global view, but Ridgeline at Rogers Ranch. This is Happy's Round. You can see a future connection there. And this could potentially be a phase 2 of Ridgeline under planning with Pape Dawson right now. Close up, did you want to add anything on Ridgeline?
No, we've done spectacularly well. I'm very pleased with both the product and the leasing.
This is north of Loop 1604 Northwest Military. This is the 16 acres that just closed to a retailer. And that deal, you'll probably see dirt moving there sooner rather than later. Yeah.
Part of what we negotiated with Martin Marietta to keep their trucks off of Military is that primary entrance there off of 1604 will stay, and we're leasing it to them for 20 more years. So for the future, that's going to stay there.
Just another view of this area, again, Baptist, future retail, and Mr. Denton just referred to the retained Martin Marietta tract there. And that covers the commercial overview.
Thank you. Do you have any questions from council? No?
The Pond Hill, the townhomes, what is the status of that now? As far as you're in phase 1, are you still looking to do a second phase on that or not?
Depends on how phase 1 goes. But yes, the second phase would be on the east side. It's already designed it's all fully designed on the east side, which would be between the tennis center and the office building on the corner. We went to the west side because the land was flatter, and in order to establish the product, we needed more units, more houses. There's 39 over there and 21 on the east side. So yes, if it looks like it's a successful project, then we'll move to the east side.
How many are on there now?
39.
Any other questions? Thank you all very much.
No, and thank you. All the new technology is wonderful here. Now we just have to learn it.
And
Thank
apparently
you.
so do we. Thank you. Okay, item 6.5, presentation discussion of upgrades to the City Hall chamber audio and video capabilities.
Curtis, come on.
Evening, Mayor and Council. Instead of laundry listing like in previous times, all the new equipment and everything, I thought I could actually show you now finally. I'm considering this is 100% done. We did have a challenge on the recording last month. That equipment has completely been replaced with brand new equipment. I'm working with them, so I think we're 100% go. So the two biggest challenges with this room were legacy equipment or equipment that was old, even maybe older than the building existed. And this room is reconfigured multiple times. You have 6 speakers for council, you have 9 speakers for P&Z, sometimes you have 12 speakers out on the floor during a workshop meeting. Sometimes on one night you can have 6 speakers up there, reconfigures to 12 speakers out here. And unless you're speaking into a microphone, it's not captured in the recording. And so the first picture here on the presentation's left, that's a control panel that basically controls the entire system. I was switching to the recorder to flip it. We have a dedicated recording system to flip it tonight so that the videos are recorded in our YouTube video. So that whole drone video that you just saw is going to be for the people who actually get to see instead of some pixelated image, you know, from that camera back there. This picture on the right is the actual audio cabinet. 1 and 2 are the new dedicated recording equipment. Instead of going to laptop, it's going to that, it's a text box as the manufacturer. The 1 is just a screen that allows me to stop and start the recording, monitor the audio levels on the recording, that such like that. 3 is the brand new audio mixer where we have our channels. We can have all these microphones. We can capture all the speakers in the room. And then 4 is our amplifier, our brand new amplifier. On the left here, that's a new installation, and you have all of your 12 channels. And on the right here, you have a extender. And so basically, when this room needs to be reconfigured, I can take relatively quickly, unplug all the mics up here, and as we're assembling the tables, you extend that to the middle, and then you plug everything on the wall. Everything's labeled, all the channels, everything's organized. Continuing on that theme, underneath your dais now, all the mics are can be unplugged and replugged, and they're all numbered. And on the right here is this tablet, and that's what controls all the audio system. And I can control all the audio levels. We'll be setting up automatically all the levels for all the microphones for all the different meetings. So right now we've only set up Council 1. I've been editing all the sound levels, then we'll save it, because obviously different speakers speak at different levels. That level of control we'll be able to have so we have a superior listening here in the audience, but also in the recording. On the right, the most obvious thing that's new when you walk in is the new projector and how crisp and clear its picture. That's a picture of the new projector. And on the left is we have now mic stands. So where in a town hall or a public hearing, anything where you want additional microphones set up for people to come up and speak instead of just one podium, we can set those up on the floor. And lastly, we wanted to improve the experience up here at the dais, and the fact that you don't have to strain your neck to see a presentation material. You actually have monitors now at your dais. There's 6 right now tonight. There's 9 for P&Z, so we have 8 monitors. You can manipulate them as you want. And the picture on the left is there's now speakers for you guys up above on the roof. And you only hear the microphones out here, not your mics. So you should get I don't know if you've noticed, but a much clearer audio back there from the speakers. Whether it's, you can set up your stand mics, you'd have residents, you'll be able to hear them a lot more clearly if they're approaching, or speaking near that boom mic setup. So it should be much more conducive to a more open meeting like that. And that concludes my presentation. Any questions?
Questions? Mike?
Is this all standard software, or is it, thinking, all the good things come to an end, down the road, somebody else might have to learn all this. Is this easy to transfer over to somebody else? Are we training other people on this now, or what are we doing on that?
It's brand new to me, and I've been learning it, and I think it's very intuitive. As for the manufacturers, we got Shure microphones, JBLs, TechVox, that's an Austin-based company. So these aren't small little subsidiaries or something that will go under, I don't think. At least auditing these audio levels, adding an extra microphone tonight in case one had the finance director sit up and speak, super intuitive, super easy. But yes, we will make sure that there's a backup for me and some continuity with this.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, but you can stay there because you're the next item.
I just want to say, way to go, Curtis.
Item 6.6, discussion action approval of electronic marquee signs selecting bid. Curtis.
All right, in January 10th, staff reached out to 4 different companies and gathered bids. On this matrix, the companies were given a lot of specifications of what exactly we wanted from technical with the board. We wanted roughly a 4x7 to fit in the marquee. We wanted one-sided, not a two-sided sign. We wanted to remove the old sign face, put the new one in. We wanted either a 16 or a 19 millimeter resolution. And on an LED board, probably the most impactful change in your specifications is that the narrower and smaller that millimeter, the more high fidelity the image will be. So a 16 millimeter industry-wide is about a standard medium level. You can get all the way up to like 9, but obviously those are much more expensive. We wanted to be able to RGB full color display. We wanted wireless control of the actual boards. You didn't have to mess with plugging into it or bringing a flash drive or anything like that. And we are recommending Apex Sign for the simple fact that they provide Optec. It's a major brand. Their board, some other company has an Optec brand. And they're providing cellular, Wi-Fi, all the specifications we asked for, but they have the longest warranty and the lowest price. Here, can you? This is a video from Apex of what our sign, this is 16 millimeter, what it would look like. And I'll discuss later, but you can rotate images, you can add pictures, videos, just text on a white background, whatever message you're needing to get across. So this proposed sign will provide a more professional and quality display. Again, this picture is a 16 millimeter resolution. That's a double-sided sign and much bigger than what we're proposing, but it is still the same LED board. And we'll be able to use it for city events, notices, any other public information. We'll be able to, if there's a road closure, any sort of information that we need to get timely, and we can actually do it because it will be software installed on a computer and you can control it remotely. And this replaces the current setup, which is Public Works Department working with the city secretary, trying to find a time to get out there, remove it, trying to fit all the different meetings and you're cramming in everything and letters fall out and the weather and everything. So Apex in their bid will provide a medium fidelity roughly 4 by 7 foot electronic message board. It will be wireless controlled using cellular technology. We will install a software called ME Pro. We can install it multiple times on multiple computers. It's not license restricted from that perspective. Again, a 7.5-year parts and field labor warranty. And ME Pro software, that's a picture of the actual user interface on the software. We can edit, upload videos, images, simple text, have them rotate, time them, do what we want. We, as staff, control the brightness of the board 100%. There's not a technical, well, I mean, maybe the LEDs can conceptually only get so bright, but there's not a technical limitation on the brightness of the board. It has automatic dimmer features. I'm recommending that we follow the dark skies ordinance that every other sign does in the city, and it's 0.3 candles over the background illumination. Now, I'm not technically savvy enough to know what 0.3 candles over the background illumination is, but we'll work with a company who, they're a San Antonio-based company, they know the dark skies ordinance, to set that, and then I think we can calibrate based on the nearby neighbors to City Hall. Is it too bright? And we can make decisions. Do we want it off in the evening? Do we tone it down a certain lumens? All that is within our control. And there will be in-person training of city staff by the sign board manufacturer. They have a Texas person who comes around and do that, and I talked to actually one of the owners of the company, oddly, and he said that we would get in training here, so another nice feature. And that concludes my presentation. Any questions? Or
Thank you. Any questions? Mike?
How big is the one that's out there now? This is going to sit over it, or is there going to be any modifications to the brickwork or anything like that now, or what's going to happen out there?
the current board is roughly 3x7. The idea is not to alter that stonework at all. Just take it, unmount it, and then remount on your electronic board. And there's already electricity out at that site. So then you only have to add this, I don't know what the cellular device will be, probably be small on the board, and then we'll make the connection to City Hall. So.
Also, is there, hacking is a big thing these days. Is there any way that this could be, since it's wireless, that somebody could hack in there and put, whatever they want on there?
Well, it will be important that the software will be hosted on the city's network. So we have pretty good security here at the city. And on top of that, we'll set strong passwords, and we can control what staff have access to it. And I don't have any more worry about it than the thousands of gigabytes of police data that is being handled wirelessly from the police department in that same vicinity, and that's secure.
Okay.
So I really like the dimmable feature. So when you say programmable, so you could set the time at a certain time at night, it would actually go down to that 3.3 candle light. In the morning, it kicks back up. All that's programmable.
Yes, sir.
Not manual. Okay.
Any other questions? Marianne?
I know I had to miss a couple of budget meetings last year, so I guess my question is, was this staff recommended, or was this resident requested?
So I think I can answer that. This is this budget year is staff recommended. It had been an agenda item in previous years. In fact, we going through old records found a proposal similar to this, and I think we brought it up before the budget process. We talked about it during the budget process. This is a budgeted item in the budget for $16,000. So this is right on that ballpark there. So I wouldn't say that, we've had hundreds of calls saying, why don't you have an electronic piece? I've had a lot of calls as to why don't we have this posted, or why don't we have this posted, or this should be updated, and it's not. And again, it's generated by the staff based upon the cumbersomeness of working through this manual system and trying to get, it may seem like a very easy task on a day-to-day basis to get, okay, we're doing a council meeting next week, we're doing a water advisory, but it is, it's like a sprinkler system in your yard. It's like the bane of my existence. What is the message we have to put? Who's directing Curtis or actually Brandon to do it? Because, you can only have so many chiefs doing it, and this is something that its current system is very inefficient, and I think we can be a lot more effective in strategic communications to our residents, informing them with multiple messages at multiple times. It's certainly going to be in a lot more effective way to communicate the actions that the city's doing.
I just asked because I would be surprised if we didn't get some, I haven't heard any public outcry requesting this you know, I know that Inwood has one, but we're not Inwood. And so I am just trying to figure out where the outcry is coming from. I recognize that it does serve as a means for providing communication. The great thing about digital communication, which this would be changed to be, is that most people get their digital information from their phones, their computers, what have you. And I didn't know what the statistics were, if you had any in terms of people getting their information from there, that, and or any statistical information regarding requests from residents to change this, because it is a big change.
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, we don't have statistical data. I can tell you anecdotally, a lot of people do get their you know, they drive by, they see that sign, and it gives them situational awareness. From personal experience, when I was at Fort Hood, I was the commander of Fort Hood, we implemented about 6 or 7 of these across the board where we used it to advertise numerous things. And so I can tell you that that was not generated from citizen, a lot of demand associated with that, but then after the fact, it was, again, you know, you don't get thank you letters for doing good things typically, but there was positive input into thanks. Now, you know, it's helpful for us to see this as we're coming in and out of, in that case, post. You know, we had them mostly in the entrances and exits.
Okay. I just kind of see it as an aesthetic, kind of like the wall along Northwest Military that's going to be repaired. It is a change, and we heard from residents about that issue. I haven't heard from any residents. I think former council person came up once and spoke about it. Other than that, I've not heard anybody speak about it. And I think I was the only no vote on the budget, so.
Any other comments? Mike?
I would like to move that we approve Apex Signs for award of the electronic marquee sign project for a total of $16,170. And if I get a second, I'll just make my comments. I have 2 concerns, maybe 3. Number one is the innate tendency to get creative with these things, which then becomes a traffic hazard. I know because I'm extremely ADD, and these electronic changeable signs on the highway are bright, shiny objects, and they can really grab me. So policy-wise, we need to keep this tame and calm. The other policy is who gets to decide what's going up there. I think I would like to see the city manager be the final authority on that. Nobody changes it without his approval. And then a suggestion, maybe this would be another one of those little buttons on the website that, like the ordinances, and show you on the website what's being displayed on it. That's not a policy, that's just a good idea fairy that settled on my shoulder, so.
Thank you. Any other comments? We'll call for a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Item 6.7, discussion and action, approval of additional funding for household hazardous waste collection. Bill?
Okay, so I'm bringing this to council because we anticipated one action and we got another one. And so I just started by saying there's 2 alternatives to this. Bottom line is that we did a survey and we got some feedback from residents saying that they were interested in a service that would facilitate the disposal of household hazardous waste. And again, for further background, we currently have, through Bear County, we have an ability to, a resident can call Bear County and they can have it scheduled and they have it picked up, and they can get that household hazardous waste picked up. There's also an ability. San Antonio does that. And then again, I will tell you that I had a conversation with Alderman Heinzelman, and who said that he has previously used San Antonio's services, and he has used that. A little bit of a disconnect on my end in that we researched that further on the website. It did not confirm whether or not a city of Shavano Park resident can use his CPS bill to go deposit in San Antonio's. My gut feeling was that that would not be possible, but then Alderman Heisman said that he has done that a couple of years ago, and so we don't have that. Nevertheless, we know that we have some ability of residents to pick up hazardous household goods, waste here. Probably like me, and I'm probably using my own personal experience as an example, I have a lot of paint, and I have a lot of stuff that I could take over to San Antonio, and I don't typically do that. And so based upon that, we did a survey. We got general support. We actually got pretty good support from the residents saying, yeah, we'd be interested in some sort of like we do with the shredder on Arbor Day. We do that for batteries occasionally on Arbor Day. We also do that for electronic equipment, where you set up a site and then you can have people drive through and they drop off their hazardous household waste, and then it's taken off because you can't just put it in the landfill. So I came to council earlier during the budget process or shortly after that, and proposed that we apply for a $12,000 grant through the ACOG. They have a program associated with that. We got council approval for that. We put in our application for that. Curtis and I actually presented to a citizens committee, which threw me for a little bit of a loop, but as it turns out, they approved a $6,000 grant, not a $12,000 grant, which ultimately isn't a lot of household hazardous waste. The contractor, which we had coordinated with through Republic, which this Stereocycle Environmental Solutions, basically said, ooh, you know, for $6,000, that's really not worth it our time. We actually have a pretty big operation, and we'll need to do that. They basically told us we won't come out there and provide that service for just $6,000. We would request it go to $12,000. So again, the implication of that very specifically is that if we want to do that this year, we will have to fund an amendment to our budget to allocate $6,000 for the household hazardous waste event as go forward. So there's several alternatives. You'll see in the packet, and I've had conversation with at least two of the aldermen, is that, you know, there's a couple courses of action. One, you can approve the $12,000, which of $6,000 will be reimbursed and $6,000 we would pay. Or the other alternative is we wait till the next cycle associated with this. We go back and reapply for the grant. I think I've figured it out now. If you ask for 20, you get 10. If you ask for 24, you probably get 12. We asked for 12, we got 6. Okay, I got that. So my read is that you got several courses of action. It's not critical that you do it this year. It would be a nice thing to do in conjunction with the effort in Arbor Day and then Earth Day. Talking with Zena and working through what we already have going on with the subcommittee associated with that. We're not, if the council were to approve ponying up $6,000 for this and then doing this, we would do it a week or two after that to make sure it was advertised. We would advertise it during the Arbor Day, Earth Day, and then we would do it on a Saturday for a 4-hour period associated with that. So again, I'm bringing it forward because it's something we talked about before. I'm disappointed that we didn't get the full $12,000 grant. I'm giving you the option of proposing to adding $6,000 to do that, and then we could execute that. If we want to try again next year, then we'll try again for the grant next year, and we'll then re-engage that. If you did if you did approve an action that would fund the $6,000, that would come from fund balance, and then that would be included in the agenda item in a few from here. So you probably have a couple questions. I'll be glad to answer them the best I can.
Questions? Mike?
So if we do this, then it's just going to be for Shavano Park residents?
Yes, we could do the same thing that CPS does. We would confirm, we'd ask for proof of residence, and we would either a driver's license or a water bill or something of that nature, where we could confirm that they lived in Shavano Park. The other thing that I was working with Brandon on is, and this company is, there's certain items that typically weigh a lot, and then they're bulky and they take up a lot of items, and we would restrict that, or we would find alternate ways to recycle. For example, batteries, we're going to be doing a battery recycle, which is a hazardous material. We're doing that during the Arbor Earth Day event on the 21st of April. We also do electronics also on that day, and we've been doing that. And those two items typically are among the most frequently recycled. Paint and chemicals are the big things that we would be targeting. Things that we don't want to be thrown into the trash can, that it gets crushed into the trash truck, compacted, and then ends up in the landfill and then filters into the aquifers. That's where we're talking about. Now, I think most people are probably like me. They know they're not supposed to do it, and they don't stick it in the trash can, but it just sits there, and it builds up. So it's something that we want to, I think we ought to do in the future. Whether we need to do it this year or not, it's up to council. And if not taken as an action this year, then I will be glad to double down in efforts in future years to try to get it done.
Would we follow, for instance, you mentioned the waste management program that is free. There's a waste management offers one. You stated that it was no limit on pickups and no limit on weight. That's not true. They do limit, because I've used them a couple of times. They'll send you a bag, and you can put as many paint cans in there as you can fit, and it's about a 40 or 50 gallon big heavy bag. They limit batteries to, I think, 3 or 4. And they will only, in Shavano Park, I don't know why, because in other areas they will take multiple bags, but they will only send you one bag at a time, and then you have to wait so many weeks before they will send you another one. And will we have parameters like they use, that you can put as much paint as you want, you can mix paints, everything like that, but hazardous chemicals like insecticides and things like that must be in marked cans. They can't just be, rusty old cans. So they won't take those.
Yeah, clearly, if approved for this year, we will have to come up with those protocols and those rules associated with that, and which would probably include a limit, especially as it's the first time we're going to do it. And so you probably would, initially you're going to get more your first year, and then as you keep going, if you keep sustaining it, hopefully you won't have as much in the future.
Any other questions?
I just have some comments, but I think we need to.
Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I move that we direct the city manager to double down next year, and we'll just drop it for this year.
Have a second.
Second.
Any other discussion?
So I had talked to Bill about this a couple different times, and one thing, Bill, I followed up after you and I spoke today, and the option for the waste disposal at the 2 centers in San Antonio, it is a CPS bill, as we agreed. My address actually does say Shavano Park. I told you I wasn't sure if they still use the San Antonio address. So when I did that a few years ago, I don't know if they allowed me to do it and didn't specifically look at it. If you have a CPS bill, and you don't live in San Antonio, or even if you do live in San Antonio, you're supposed to have a fee on your schedule that shows a fee that you pay, and that allows you to use the disposal. I'm not sure if they let that slide for me or not, but I looked up, and I think what you and Curtis found, that's what I confirmed today, so that may pose a problem. However, I do think we have some options for our residents. that's been discussed for pickup. My family's obviously very involved in the Arbor Day and the recycling efforts, so I am very, very interested in these things. But my initial approval or interest was that we did get the $12,000 grant. And because we didn't get the full grant, I'm not sure the $6,000 right now is worth doing. I'd like to look at next year, and I think we're building on things as we've gone into several Arbor Days where we've expanded our recycling program to batteries, and we're looking at light bulbs. We're looking at, we're obviously doing all the electronics and the shredding. So I think we keep adding elements to that are beneficial to our residents, and I think that's I'm hearing good feedback on that. But I think I would agree with this proposal that we hold off and make sure that we have communicated all. I think that's the big thing right now. Between now and then, if we postpone this, we need to communicate. Arbor Day weekend would be a great time to do that, newsletter articles, et cetera, of what our options are as a resident of Shavano Park to dispose of those properly at this point.
Thank you. Mary Ann, any comments? Okay, any other comments? Okay, I'll call for a vote. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. The motion passes. 6.8, fund balance transfer. To approve the transfer portions of fund balance to capital replacement improvement fund as outlined by the city manager. And I will let you go through that.
Super, I'd be glad to. We discussed this briefly last month, and then council's guidance was city manager come up with a specific proposal. So just kind of to give some background as associated with this, at the end of each fiscal year, the city reports an unassigned fund balance to the general fund, which either can be an amount in excess of your legally restricted or committed fund balance. In other words, we have funds allocated, but then there's extra money in, so to speak, the checking account in which are uncommitted. And so these funds are available for a lot of things: capital projects, capital equipment replacement, budgetary shortfalls, unexpected expenditures. You want to have some money that you have available in case of emergency or something of that nature. But all those monies require an approval of appropriations by the city council. Well, the city has a policy established for that, and the policy basically says that we should maintain an unassigned fund balance equal to 25 to 50% of the budgeted expenditures, which basically you take this year's total budget, $1, you divide it in half, and that gives you the 50%. You divide it in a quarter, and you get your 1/4%. And you should maintain basically a savings account or this unrestricted fund balance between the 25 and the 50%. We have traditionally, in the last few years, been maintaining about 50%. In terms of recent history, in 2016 is when we first really took a look at this, did a deep dive, and said, wow, we've got a lot more in our unrestricted fund balance than 50%. We actually had 1.6 million. Most of that went to drainage, and some of it went to fire, and some of it was allocated somewhere, other places. And I'll just basically remind you that 1.6 million can almost all be attributed to a single taxpayer that we got in sales tax that then no longer is in the city of Shavano Park as we move forward. 2017, that was basically last year at this time, we took a look at the fund balance after we had made that $1.6 million adjustment. And we looked at our fund balance, and we were at 49.8%, as I recall, last year. It could have been 49.9, it could have been 50.1 or something like that. It was right at the 50%. So there was no action taken, but it was considered about this time, either in January or February last year. This year we finished our audit, and this comes right out of the audit book, basically our proposed budget is $5.6 million. The 50% would be the $2.8 million based upon the fund balance that we currently have, which is 3.072. We have $270,600 that's in excess of that 50% fund balance. In January, City Council took an action to fund repairs, partial repairs, in conjunction with the developer and the homeowners of the wall that exists along Northwest Military Highway and allocated $20,000 for that. Council's guidance was to take the $270,000, subtract the $20,000, and then to propose a solution for transferring the remaining $250,599 of fund balance to the capital replacement / improvement fund. I have a couple of slides associated with that I'll show for the audience. You've got it in your packet. I've got some basic options and some other options that are available. If you could go to the next slide here. So the basic option basically, and I'll kind of talk through each one of these things. The self-contained breathing apparatus is a mandatory requirement that our firefighters use. It's the oxygen cylinders and those things that they use to fight fires associated with that. We have an allocation, we have a requirement to replace them by 1 December. We were pretty tight on our capital replacement fund last year. We funded about $30,000 in the last budget cycle, but we left a bill of $30,000 to be funded in the next budget cycle. And with the idea that we would fund that, it'd be approved effective 1 October, and we would make that order 1 October, and we would get those apparatuses in just in time to not to meet the requirements so they wouldn't expire. I sent a note out after the last council meeting to the Public Works Director, the fire, and the chief and admin as to take a look at the capital replacement schedule, identify those capital items, make sure that the cost that's projected in the replacement year is correct, and then send me your input associated with any adjustments. Chief Van Otten came back and said, look, that cost for the self-contained breathing apparatus, and Chief, is it 10 or 12? What's the number that we're talking about? 14 air packs. 14 air packs isn't going to cost $128. It's going to cost $135, and we were, which is about it's about $7,000 more than what we had previously done. $7,000 plus the $30,000. I'm recommending that out of that $250,000, we take $37,000 of that, and we apportion that towards what is known cost that we will have to order this on 1 October in order to get it in time. So that, to me, it seemed like a no-brainer associated with that. We've also got a looming requirement to replace a fire truck and an engine in 2020. And so we've been saving it for that over the years, as we are both of our engines, both of our ambulances. And so those are the biggest ticket items the city has in the capital replacement. All 4 of those belong in the fire department. So we're I'm recommending a total cost adjustment from $650,000 to $800,000 and an allocation of the $250,000, $135,000 towards that fire engine. Last year, we, for the first time, this is fairly new, we proposed funding a Public Works Director's truck, which would second as a heavy lift truck to pull the heavy equipment that we've received, the roller, some of the other things. Currently, all our trucks are 150s. They're basically standard pickup trucks that you use to drive from point A to point B. You can tow with them, but obviously having a 250 that's meant to an increased payload as well as transmission. I'm not an expert on trucks, but this would be a proposal associated for that. We allocated some monies towards it last year, and I don't have the exact figure, but in the last budget cycle, we had $30,000 on that, and reviewing that, Brandon Peterson's coming to me and says, if you want, in order to buy a 250 level truck, I'm not saying we're gonna buy a Ford, but that's, in my mind, that's where that is. It's about a $40,000 cost. In order to meet that requirement, we need $18,000 associated with this year's budget to be able to do that. And I think those numbers don't look like round numbers, but I think what we had done was we took some of the other allocations from one of the other trucks, we added it in, and I think we put 10,000, we had 8,000. So anyway, the numbers I don't have exactly off the top of my head. That's why it's not like we put a round number in last year. This rounds up to 40, so 18,000 is the proposal. The dump truck. A dump truck costs about $80,000. We have an old used dump truck that's working fine now, but we have not started saving for a future replacement. I briefed last year that we thought we were going to be very, very competitive for this grant program that's done through the Volkswagen lawsuit that occurred. Volkswagen, again, they had apparently deceptive practices. There was a lawsuit. They lost the lawsuit. States across the United States are allocated millions of dollars. The state of Texas has allocated millions of dollars for the primary purpose of taking old, energy inefficient, polluting vehicles like our dump truck and then replacing that as a replacement cost. We got several briefings from ACOG associated with that. I mean, it was like lean forward the saddle. We were going to get this. That has slow rolled now. I'm not very optimistic that a lot of money is going to be apportioned from the governor's office or from the state of Texas down to the counties, and that once it gets to the counties, we are envisioning a lot of people competing for that money, including via buses and all counties and all the municipalities. So we're probably not likely to get that. So it's a cost that's not going to occur to us in the near future, but again, we're recommending $20,000 allocated to that, which is kind of jump starts, and then we'll start that apportionment of funds hopefully on an annual basis to where when we need to replace that, we'll have that. Council approved in the budget last year two things associated with a municipal tract. It was about $24,000, as I recall. $14,000 of it went to environmental friendly parking. $10,000 went to the electrical. So we're still in the coordinating phase of that. We're in coordination with CPS to do the electrical piece. We think we have a plan associated with that, but it's a deliberate process to coordinate where the utilities dropped and how we're going to do it and work through that. It's not the topic here. We think we still have enough money to do that. The $14,000 is not going to, under any scenario that I know, be enough to allocate for the environmental friendly parking. The $40,000 is on the top end of that, and that was that gridded parking associated with that. I will tell you that we have task order with KFW Engineering to do a survey of the parking, because really we have a lot of trees. The trees don't necessarily grow straight. You have to have a traffic pattern associated with that. The spaces of each one of the parking spaces need to be a certain manner, and it's going to have to be measured fairly precise. The survey is done. We have not received the results of how many spaces we can actually get to where there's a traffic flow, there's entrance and exit. They're working on that now. Subsequent to that, we will then need to determine what, and there'll probably be a couple options. You know, one option will be the permeable cones associated with what we briefed you initially. There may be some other options which are more like brick, and I say brick, laying a brick stone in that look like parking lot lane stripings, having that painted, having topsoil on top of that, and an ability to grow grass. So there's two options. There's a low end that would, hopefully, we can work through that, but I'm not sure. And then there's a high end, which would be these plastic inserts that you put topsoil on, and then you grow grass associated with that. Anyway, this allocation of funds allocates monies to environmental friendly parking that, again, it's allocated, and I think that would provide an ability for us to do that. Now, last thing I'd say on that is I still have to bring environmental friendly parking and solutions and costs to the city council to get approval to do that. So again, I'm allocating this being allocated to the capital replacement funds, and none of these would be in itself a purchase this year during this budget cycle for this. All allocations will have to be brought back to council for approval for actually doing it. I'm not sure what that alarm is. Everyone's at. Okay, so just kind of going through my notes there. I included a equipment replacement schedule for you. You can see what we allocated last year, how this would be adjusted. That's fairly straightforward. I'm sure you have questions, so I'll pause at this point.
Okay, do we have questions, or anybody want to make a motion? Mike?
I make a motion to approve the fund transfer portions of fund balance to capital replacement improvement funds as outlined by the city manager, except I would delete the $40,581 for improvements and add that to the fire engine.
Do we have a second?
I would second.
Discussion?
Having had my motion seconded, I'll say, especially with no idea how many parking lot spots we're going to get from this, there's no way to evaluate the value of that environmentally friendly parking area. It's on the municipal tract. We're already heard concerns from the citizens about what we're doing to the municipal tract. I think leave it alone was the premier response on the core survey. We don't need to spend that money when we have a huge amount that's going to be required for a fire engine. We've got $10 million worth of drainage. We don't need to build a parking space of unknown utility for just a couple of events during the year. So that's why I made the motion that I did.
I'd like to ask for a clarification, Bill. When you say you don't know how many parking spots and you came up with this dollar figure, was that based on the square footage or the area in general?
There's two things we did. We took the, Curtis, correct me if I'm wrong, we did take, I asked what the estimate was that we had received from True Grid associated with that.
And they came out and measured?
They did not, because we hadn't had it surveyed. I mean, we basically gave them a square footage if we did this, how that might be, and we did back of the envelope math, I mean, frankly. And then the other way I got that figure was I took the amount that was available, and I said, okay, if you subtract the fire and the PWs, how much do I have left? And that's what I got. And so, again, it's in the ballpark. And I would say that, I'll just kind of say up front, all these numbers that are in the capital replacement and improvement fund are allocated, and they're allocated by council, and they can be modified with a vote by council at any given time. So if we wanted to fully fund the dump truck in this thing, if we want to put it all in drainage, and then later on you wanted to come back and you wanted to upgrade the fire engine that's going to be replaced, or if you wanted to upgrade the environmental friendly parking, that money is, as long as it's a capital project, can be reallocated any time. Typically, you don't want to do that because you want to typically plan in advance, have a program schedule, predict it, and then do it from there. So that's why I did make a note in here. And I do acknowledge that we have a large drainage requirement that we're working through, and I've got a phased approach to doing that. Ultimately, we're gonna have a shortfall in drainage. There's some decisions that have to be made in the future that we can just say out front. Simply, the dump truck is something that you got to have a dump truck. Can you make it by with an old one? You can, and then you defer it as long as you can, so you're not buying dump trucks every 10 years. You're trying to maximize the use of it and be cost efficient, so you get to the point of no return. So that can be deferred. Other things can be deferred. You're going to have a decision in 2019 in terms of, are you going to purchase a fire engine like we currently have, or are you going to purchase a ladder truck if you purchase, and that is a decision later on. It can be deferred. It could be, you can allocate funds now towards it. You can change your mind later on. You can, not allocate funds for it, and then you can add funds to it later on to do it. There's a lot of ways to do this. This is the beauty behind the Capital Replacement Improvement Fund, is it gives you flexibility so that you can purchase large items without dipping significantly into your fund balance or having to raise taxes on a given year because you're saving it as you go through. It's a long-term project that gives you some flexibility. So you asked for a proposal. I mean, this is, there's a lot of ways to do it. This is my proposal I've given.
Thank you.
So again, Bill, what you're saying is this proposal for the fund balance allocation is, all of these items still have to be voted on and approved by city council. So
Correct.
If we approve all this tonight, this does not commit to these individual categories until we approve as a city council.
That's correct. Having said that, it's harder once you allocate it to a certain particular thing. You know, people tend to say, hey, we made that decision, we allocate it. I mean, just human nature is, it tends to lead you to a decision as to where you're gonna go. And, because then you have to actually change an allocation to do something different, so.
So we really don't have a plan on the parking, really? It's just concepts, basically, right now, is all it is?
We don't have a specific plan, but, you know, the first thing we did was we did go the task order, and Chris Otto is here. He could back me up if he's need to. We did the survey. He's in the process of saying, now, what is that survey? How do you translate that survey on the ground to a, you know, you gotta have a thorough through, you gotta be able to turn around, you gotta have adequate space between the parkings, and there's certain parking size, and that is being developed now.
So if we decide to go ahead with this, when would it theoretically start?
Chris, can you help me out?
Yeah, so we finished the survey, I guess it was about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. We finished the survey, and I've got one of my engineers that actually started on the layouts last Thursday. So by the next council meeting, we should have a pretty solid concept laid out, identifying how many parking stalls we can get and where the drive aisles are gonna be.
Now, somewhere back in the drainage studies, there was a potential for using the municipal tract for retention or, you know, running it off. Will, if anything is done here, how will that be impacted by this? Or do we even know?
If we do detention, it's gonna be more towards the corner. The parking that we're looking at is closer to the building in the area that, as I understand, is already being used for overflow parking. Does the sound going in and out on me? Anyway, so it's already being used for overflow parking. This is just to define, you know, where those parking stalls are, so it's a little bit easier for people to find a spot.
But the water to get to the detention has to come somewhere from that side of the tract. Is it gonna run, I mean, do we know how it's gonna run? Is it gonna run down behind City Hall? Will it need to maybe be cheaper on when we lay it all out to run right through that parking that we're gonna be doing? Or do, like I said, do we even know that?
My intent with the parking is to maintain existing grade as much as possible. So we're not gonna be grading out a parking lot. We're basically just gonna be coming up with a striping plan and then finding creative, natural ways of delineating that striping.
Bill, if we take this out, if we go ahead with Mike Simpson's proposal, motion, and take this out, do we stop everything they're doing, or?
No.
We would still basically be gathering the preliminary designs and everything like that, and we could maybe bring this back up in the summer budget?
When Chris gives me the number of spaces in the outline, we will then go through developing a task order or a bid piece in which we will then go back to companies and say, how might you do this? We're gonna get, and I envision that'll take a month. And I've talked to several of you. There really potentially is a way to mirror what Mike Naughton did over at the Bader House. At the Bader House, the area was constrained associated with the parking and the roads to where we looked at, during the plan approval, he didn't have an appropriate, adequate fire lane. So they obviously wanted to keep a lot of green space. What the solution was they did a curve cut, and they employed this coned plastic inch long, inch wide stuff, and then they put topsoil on it, and that supports the heavy requirements of a fire truck. Because a fire truck is a lot bigger than a sedan or even a quarter-ton truck or whatever it may be, half-ton truck. So again, we showed you some options using those coned items, which would really be able to support a lot. We don't really have a lot of weight requirements in there. It's mostly POVs for city events. There's a real option that we could do something similar to what was done at the Bader House, to where you use these brick layers in there just to outline the parking spaces. You put topsoil on it, grow soil, and that in theory, you're driving down Days of Allah, you're not even going to be able to see it because it'll be grassed, and then as you drive through it, you'll be able to park in parking spaces doing that. That's something I haven't got any quotes on it or not. In this month, or maybe 2 months that we look at doing this, we'll get some options. And if the council approves the option that the motion that Alderman Simpson gave, and say this thing cost $40,000 and we're going to bring it back in June or May, then the council would have the option of taking that from fund balance with a known cost, or taking it from other places in the capital replacement fund. You can reallocate it. So I'm trying to tell you, you have different options. I wish I had the planning done associated with this. I don't have it at this time. So.
I guess the question that I have is related to the survey. Is there a need or a requirement or any concern that we have to work with TCEQ on any of this?
As long as we don't put down impervious pavement, we don't need to go through TCEQ. And like I said, we're not planning on doing really any grading at all. It's more just delineating striping. And like Bill said, when you're driving through there, you'll be able to see it, but from the road, you won't be able to. That's the end goal.
So there's not a concern about TCEQ. That's the main thing. I think you said no, so that's
I'll double check it, but I don't believe so.
Push the mic out a little bit.
I don't know, that's me.
Apparently I talk too loud.
And then I guess the second question is, are we done taking resident input regarding the town plan update? And the reason why I ask is because to the extent that residents can chime in and give us input about this, I think I've done all the surveys online. I don't know if there's anything else coming out, if we're done, but it might be nice to, have that out there.
I think I can answer that relative to this without getting off topic here, in that, in this case, well, first of all, to answer your question, Chairman Jansen asked us to close out the existing surveys that are there so that they can be presented to P&Z. And so we'll present that at the next P&Z, along with a draft that he's been working on with staff of like the introduction chapters. And then from there, he will apportion which other portions are going to go forward. There's always the opportunity to take and resurvey a draft of or an element of the survey.
And not to get off topic of the agenda item, I only ask, given the fact that MuniTract is a big part of the town plan, and given that if there is a need by the city to try to do everything possible to obtain as much input from residents as we can, specifically informing them and identifying for them, here's what's happening over here. I know I may not be the only one, but I know I've gotten calls about, okay, well, what's happening? We see trees, we see, different things. So if there are plans to do that, it might be helpful, and we might gain some additional resident input on specifically as to parking in that particular area as it pertains to MuniTract.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'll call for a vote on the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. The motion carries. 6.9, discussion action approval of ordinance 0-2018-001, amending the fiscal year 2017-18 budget, resourcing drainage projects, transfer to capital, purchase of metal detector, Fiesta Metals, ADA-assisted listening device, repair of Northwest Military rock wall, household hazardous waste collection, and increasing building maintenance, first reading.
So this is, there's a lot of moving parts to the budget amendment. The budget amendment itself is relatively simple. You update the basic expense and revenue report in your budget, and then you've got those line items. I've tried to list those the main topics in the agenda here, so I'll kind of go through this. The first thing that I would say is that the ordinance, when it's passed and there's a motion, there can be a motion to pass the ordinance as proposed, but we will need to then, as amended by the previous capital replacement fund and improvement adjustment that goes from there. I think I have a couple slides, so I think I'll work through the slides first and then come back to my thing. First of all, revenues. We don't really have any specific changes in your traditional revenues in terms of sales tax, ad valorem taxes, fees, or any of that nature. We do have proposed general fund changes, which are inter-fund transfers from two areas. One is from the court security fund. That's $4,736, which was used to fund the metal detector. The metal detector that's employed already. You'll recall that there was, and I think it was in September or November, there was an agenda item which council approved the purchase of that, and then subsequent to that, we were going to amend the budget. So that's coming from the court security fund. The remainder of the funds used to amend the budget is coming from general fund. We already just talked about the $270,000, which comes from the excess fund balance. So you're really talking about, in addition to the $270,599, an additional $20,000 that's used for various other things. And I'll explain those in detail. We just talked about the transfer to capital. Council's made a decision on that. We will execute that in accordance with the motion that was just passed. So again, we understand that. Several months ago, before it was November, council approved the funding of Fiesta Metals for up to $2,000 for that. Those metals will be primarily used in Arbor Day and during the Fiesta ramp up towards that event. Previously, we talked about, and so it's been approved, we've purchased those metals, but a budget amendment has to be the bookkeeping that comes to make up for that. Previously, we talked about the improvements of the City Hall chamber. One of the things that we've identified is requirement for ADA-assisted listening devices. Through consultation of the funds and what we can and can't use for funds, we realized we could not use PEG funds for that. And so we did not include that in that proposal, but we've had requests from citizens to provide assisted living devices, listening devices. And we know that by ADA laws, we're required to do that. So we've done some further researches on that, and Curtis can answer any questions that's in your packet for that, but that provides an ability to provide 3 sets, and that would meet the requirements by law. That's a new item that has not been approved previously, but that we're asking for a budget amendment for that. The Northwest Military Wall was approved last meeting, and it was allocated $20,000, up to $20,000 from the fund balance reserve. This is just the budget amendment that reallocates that funding. The building maintenance, I think I have some data and a slide for that, so I'll talk that in a minute. I'm going to skip it for a second. But I will say that is unexpected. It's primarily focused on a fire code to bring this building up to fire code, and that's one of our goals. Metal detectors, that again was approved in either September or October. That purchase has been made. That's the funding that came from the court security funds, and we've employed that as a random act tonight, but we also employ that every time we do a court. It's not something we're gonna do every council meeting, but it's something that, with the elections and things that went on with Florida, it's an awareness thing. Court receipt printers is a new item. It is a item that we have to have. We have two of them. They cost $750 each. One of them has already gone in-opt, and we've had to replace it at mission essential kind of requirement. And the other one works, but they don't make printer cartridges. We have some, but it's on its last leg, and we're to the point where we're not going to be able to function with the existing one. I got that about right, but I know that it works now. It's a matter of time before it doesn't work. We have a requirement for two. We've already purchased one, so I need to come to you for an amendment. Did not anticipate that in the May, June timeframe when we were doing the budget amendment. Drainage, I'm going to come to you with, I have a slide that's going to talk more about that. And go to the next slide. This is drainage. Chris is here to help me out if I go through here. I'm going to kind of go to the bottom right corner of that. We proposed a couple things last meeting. We had three options. We had three phases to each option. We basically ultimately chose option one. And what I got was an execution task from City Council to execute option one. We've talked about also the planning required for options 2 and 3, and that can be done simultaneously here. So what I am proposing here is a total cost of $564,188 to be approved in this budget amendment, and it's broken out in this way. In under Drainage 1, under construction, you have Drainage Area 1, 2, 5, and 12 twice. The total cost for that is $304,000. That is the construction cost associated with that alone. The task order 4, we asked KFW, we've actually worked in conjunction with KFW Engineering to propose 3 task orders. Task order 4 is simply the planning and all of the surveying and the geotech costs associated with the prep work and everything that needs to be done for option 1, phase 1. That's $63,000. Go back one slide. In that $63,000, so the note there that's associated with all 4 of those task orders, which if you haven't done a lot of these projects, we, the City of Shavano Park, have not done a lot of projects, whether it be drainage, whether it be road construction, whether it be a number of projects. Typically, your costs associated with the engineering support seems high, but it is what it is, and I've confirmed this. It's about 15%. It includes coming up with the requirements, bidding the requirements out. Staff doesn't do this anymore. You know, like we did the Public Works building. Staff created the bid requirements. We bidded it out. We evaluated it. We then approved it. We went through all that. In this case, the city engineer takes the lead role in that, and then during the construction, they provide the supervision associated with that and the expertise to make sure it's done. This also includes, you know, I mentioned before, the surveying and then the geotech core sampling that has to be done to the grounds to make sure that the things are done. Task order 4, which is phase 1 of option 1, is primarily centered around 2 culverts in Drainage Area 12. That's the most critical, where we have cutoffs. You have residents cut off in heavy rains, and it happens the most frequent. In order to do those 2 culverts in the low water, or those crossings at the low water crossings, you have to do your geotech engineering. There is a deployment cost for doing that. When you deploy the machinery to do that, it makes sense that if you know you're going to do several more, you ought to do them at the same time. So task order 4 includes the geotech engineering costs associated with task order 5, which are the remaining low water crossings, so we get efficiencies gained there. This assumes with high probability that next year you're going to budget and you're going to approve funding of, the kind of the low-hanging fruits, the low water crossings on Fawn, Bent Oak, and Cliffside, because those are also reoccurring low water crossings where we have flooding issues associated with that. So the task order is different than what I briefed before because it includes some of the prep work for the task order 5, which in my best objective estimation can be feasibly and probably will be, the staff will recommend funding for next year in next year's budget. So this just does that work in advance. Could you go back one slide? Task order 5 and 6 are optional, but I'm highly recommending that in coordination with the engineer. And let me try to explain that. Task order 5 would be what we propose to plan for this year so that we can budget with specificity in next year's budget. Again, it's those 3 water low crossings which have been traditionally a problem and that are relatively lower cost in the grand scheme of things. In other words, it's not the $5.7 million, it's not a $2.1 million project, it's not a $800,000. Each one of those are $150,000 to $200,000 projects. So it's very likely we will have that. So the task order would say, let's plan it now. We'll get the fidelity associated with that so that we can budget it and then we can execute it next year. Task order 6 is a little bit more challenging. Our city engineer did a drainage study based upon the most up-to-date technologies that we have that provide models for flooding. But these models include a $5 million project and a $2 million project, of which, in my consultation and coordination with them, I think I am not comfortable recommending with certainty to council that we should do a $5 million project without getting further detailed planning analysis so that Chris can come up here and brief what that really means. But we're really talking about the preliminary work associated with confirming the model that exists and confirming the solutions. I would hate to propose and come back next year and say, look, I want to do a $5 million project which goes through 14 people's properties. It's going to cost $5.7 million. We're going to have to go out for a bond. If in reality the preliminary planning says that there are alternative solutions that provide a 90 to 95% solution to the flash flood problem associated with that. So I'll have Chris come up here in a minute to talk about, why this might be this is a good idea, because ultimately you're going to need to do the surveying to put the low water crossings in, which I think, like the previous ones, you can say in pretty good certainty those are needed. The question is, do you really need a stormwater drainage system which takes that all the way through that whole cycle? Or can you get by with the low water crossings? We haven't done the analysis to do that. And so I'm going to ask Chris in a minute to talk about whether or not the costs associated with the surveying and the further analysis will translate directly into the cost savings when you get ready to implement it. Okay, so this is probably a good time to do that. Chris, if you could talk about task order 6, what your concept is, how is it going to be cost effective? If we spend this money, are we going to save cost savings and we can apply this to future jobs?
Right, so on task order 6, the drainage study that we did was very high level using LiDAR data. LiDAR data is flown aerial, and tree coverage, creates issues with it. It's not the most accurate way of doing things. And we didn't look at multiple routes and options. We didn't look at utilities because it was a macro level analysis. So what we're proposing to do is go out and do a partial survey, particularly on Turkey Creek area, going through, get actual field survey of the natural low, actually pick up the finished floors on the houses that are adjacent to the natural low, so we can see how high they are in relationship. Using that survey data, we'll run an updated hydraulic analysis and determine are homes actually flooding or is it just getting in their yards? Right now, the models indicate homes flood, but we don't know where their finished floors really are. And then the other thing we'll do with that is we'll run some route analysis and determine, you know, the route that we had proposed in the master drainage plan, is that really the best route? You know, we chose that route because of the homes. We didn't want to be running pipe between houses, so we tried to focus on the road. Maybe the houses are far enough apart that it does make sense to run the pipe through there and try to get easements. We'll look at utilities, water, electric, identify conflicts, and, you know, try to minimize that. And so everything that we do as part of the preliminary engineering report will play directly into the final set of plans that we would ultimately do in the future. So there is no wasted money in it. All that effort is just stepping forward. You know, we'd probably get to, you know, maybe 15 or 20% plans when we do something like this. And then Elm Spring, it's the same thing, just getting more survey data, kind of really validating what's going on, and then look at different options for how to collect that water and get it through without flooding anybody and getting the road dry. And then Unitrack, I know several people had recommended we look at running a pipe along De Zavala directly into the creek and just diverting that water away from Ripple entirely. So we can look into that option. And then the other thing on Ripple Creek in particular, when we did the drainage study, we had large drainage areas. We're going to make those drainage areas smaller, come up with more calculation nodes to really refine what that floodplain analysis looks like and get a better idea on what's going on.
So the one thing that Chris and I have been talking about, and we obviously have concerns about the municipal tract on anything, whether it be drainage, whether it be detention pond, anything. So we really are cognizant of that. We've heard some feedback in terms of the detention pond that, you know, can you berm it up? Can you do this? You know, are there other options? Part of the current plan is that the runoff from the municipal tract, which goes under De Zavala, goes through that drainage easement, it parallels Ripple Creek, then crosses Ripple Creek, then goes back through towards the almost piece in there. There's a number of things that have to be, would need to be done to implement the plan as proposed. You'd have to create a detention pond, then you'd have to widen the crossing under De Zavala. Then there's a low water crossing on Ripple Creek, and then there's the easements, and then the drainage that further goes all the way back to Olmus Park through several properties. It's possible, what I've asked Chris to do is if we could then divert water, basically, that's already coming down through that way, and then push it through a stormwater directly into Olmus Creek, where it's going to go anyway, but it's going to go and avoid the residential property, then you could avoid the detention pond and the clearing of those trees associated with that. You would not have to probably increase the flow underneath De Zavala. You'd save that cost. You wouldn't have to put perhaps the low water crossing on Ripple Creek where it currently is, and right now that runs like a very fast river under the highest conditions. You can't cross that one either. So that would, you know, the goal would be to divert enough to where there's still water coming through there, but it would be safe to cross under almost all circumstances. And then you wouldn't have to do the downstream. So that money that would be allocated towards those really 3 or 4 portions of those projects, could we move it down De Zavala and then avoid the controversy and the issues associated with it, with the municipal tract, and then the property through some of the landowners we've already heard who weren't in favor of that. So that's part of what that third part would do.
Anybody have any questions?
It's kind of the smallest issue on the list, I guess, but the Fiesta metals, when this came up in November, I think that we, the figure was like $1,500, wasn't it, for the Fiesta medals?
2,000 is what I'm remembering. I don't have the minutes in front of me, but
Have we already bought them?
yes, we have.
Okay, well, how much was it? We don't know? You don't know?
I'm thinking it's 1,900 and, I don't know. Do we know the cost? It's probably in the invoice in Gina's office if we want to go, I
Okay.
can probably
Well,
go
I mean,
find
there
it.
was some discussion at that time. I know that the mayor and I had about seeking, possibility of getting, sponsorships to privately pay for those.
Yeah. We can still do that. That's not an action that I've taken on to go out and
Okay.
solicit for that. But it's possible.
Okay.
Whether we
well,
bought it now or not, we haven't deployed them. And that's something that can be considered.
Okay, fine. I'll speak to you about it
I
privately.
do want to talk about building maintenance. And if you don't have any more questions for Chris, you can sit down and then we can go from there.
Does anybody have questions for Chris? No? Thank you, Chris.
You got an attachment in your package that talks about building maintenance. We've had some unexpected cost for the building maintenance. I'm going to find attachment 8 real quick here. Okay, so primarily our expenses, and I think we had 10,000 allocated for building maintenance at City Hall. We've had several septic issues. Our septic system's old, and it's caused us quite a bit of problems. We're trying to provide an alternate aerial system. The current one in the triangle is not ideal and functioning well. So we've had several septic problems. We've had lighting problems out into the front. You'll notice that those bollards that have lights in them, they've all been replaced with LED lights. The plastic that's been melted has all been replaced. Great initiative by Brandon, fantastic.
Look much better.
They look much better. They're not a safety hazard. We actually had a kid that touched one of them during one of our events and burned his hand. And so that's what prompted us to do all that. So it's going to save us money in the long run with the LEDs, but they need to be replaced. And so that costs us a little bit. Ultimately, we're working on bringing the City Hall to fire compliance, okay? So the big, Brandon's done, he's reported, and I put in my city manager's report, 70 to 80% is complete, but some of the major things that are required now are emergency lighting exits and things that require expenditures of money associated with electrician. And so that's what we have. And let's see. There's another fairly big cost is the backflow valve and the sprinkler system. We're required, I think it's a TCEQ requirement, to have a backflow piece. Ours is not, it's in need of repair, it's not functioning properly, needs to be replaced. It's a pretty big expense, several $1,000s. Broke in the freeze. Ultimately, all right, I'm trying to find this attachment real quick because the specifics. Probably shouldn't have put it in attachment 8, I probably should have put it closer. Okay, I've located it. We spent $1,700 on the septic and plumbing, about $1,900 on LEDs and globes. We've had electrical issues with fans, ACs, plugs, etc. We spent $2,000 on that. The fire code and alarm, $1,800. And routine building maintenance, $2,000 so far. So projected, we're looking at safety and security lights. If the power were to go off and then people needed to evacuate this building, at approximately $8,300. There's a requirement for us to stripe the inside of the public works, the police parking lot to meet code, which we haven't done. That's $1,000. We are proposing that the lights that are in the parking lot, the overhead lights, be replaced with LEDs. You can see there's a small cost for septic drain field relocation. The backflow preventer and sprinkler repairs about $2,000, and this proposal would leave, could you go down a little bit, about only $1,600 in reserve for future expenditures. So this came from Brandon. He could probably answer more specifically the questions, but the budget amendment allocates a fund. We've spent basically almost the $10,000 we allocated. We've been pretty good about not spending that much money, but we've had, as listed here, we've had unexpected costs, and we have expected costs that we're still looking at. So, subject to your questions on any of those items, I'm ready to engage.
Anybody have a question? Mike?
On the two printers for the court,
Yes, sir.
can that not come out of court technology? Does it need to come out of general fund?
You're correct, it can, but we don't have any, we rely heavily on court technology, and there's not enough funds in the court technology to do it.
Okay, and then just a point of information, the motion was made to buy 10,000 or 1,000 medals out of, Fiesta medals out of fund balance, and that passed unanimously. So there wasn't a dollar figure in the minutes.
Just a question on the septic tank. I know we've gone back and forth on this, but we keep spending money. I know we looked at options to maybe try to partner with, 911. Is there any reason it seems like we're probably at a critical mass where we need to think about something going forward on that, but maybe for a different discussion, but is that being considered?
It is. Brandon and I have a conversation about once every month or two. Part of what we thought was when Bear 911 moves to that, and they move some of their operations over there, that'd give us some relief. I still look at their parking lot, and they got anywhere from 7 to 12 cars there. So I've got to reevaluate that. One thing that Brandon did, Brandon can talk this. I think we found that we have 2 septics, right?
There's 3 tanks that are actually out there, but they're not their actual sizes for the capacity. The original design had 3 to 4 over at Bear 911, and they didn't really have as many people we have in here originally designed for. But I have a septic engineer working with me right now to make sure our flows that are coming out of here, what we use off of our water meter each day, can actually fit for that tank. But December we pumped it, and then we also just pumped it this last Saturday. So there's issues with it that we're trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, it overflowed Saturday. I didn't include that in my city manager's report, but Brandon and team had a pleasant morning. Actually, a very unpleasant morning, but thank you for doing that.
Yes.
And as he mentioned, we have a septic engineer doing that as required, and then it has to get plans approved. We'll have to then work through that. It has to be permitted through TC Cube, and we're trying to create a second alternate discharge aerial system associated with that. The problem is that the city hall was not built according to the plans. The septic system was supposed to be somewhere completely different than where it is. And so the plans don't mirror back in 2001 or whatever it may be. So what we're doing is we're recreating those plans with the proposed change that he's got. We'll get those approved, and we'll have a as-built plan once Brandon gets that finished. So it's like a lot of things that I'm not trying to throw stones, but there's a number of things that weren't at the end built in accordance with the plans associated with the City Hall. And we're going to work on that. That's part of the fire, bringing it up to code, and then same thing with the septic. And electric is a mystery, and we're just trying to do the best we can with electric.
Any other questions?
Just to be clear, with respect to the drainage component, what you're asking is for this amendment will allow you to better brief council in the future in terms of this is what we think, this is how much it likely will cost, this is what our studies and surveys have shown us. So it's all for the betterment of giving council better guidance when we make decisions down the road.
Yes, task order 4 is actually full design of Cliffside and Fawn Drive. We'll actually design those, bid them, and start construction. Task order 5 will be to fully design Windmill, Ben Oak, and Cliffside. So we will take those all the way to 95% plans. So we'll have, very good quantities. We'll have, good cost estimates, so that next year we can budget for construction, and we're ready to bid them October 1 if you also choose. And then task order 6 is just getting a better understanding of what is going on in those areas and the best solution. We found a solution. Now we want to look for the best solution that we can move forward with.
Okay. I was just questioning it because we just had a meeting where we allocated 367, and now that number's gone up to 5K. And if this helps that, future councils in terms of making decisions, I am for that. I'm a little bit queasy given the fact that these numbers just keep rising.
Could you go back one slide? Okay, so 367, we're executing, and those will be done, lock, stock, and barrel.
Right, I understand that. I mean, I know that, I know you're coming with, it's just the dollar figures just kind of keep going up, and I think what you're saying is that this helps future councils in terms of what these budget dollars are actually going to be.
Yes, and the task order 5 is really the planning that has to be done. So it's leaning forward, and there, the only one that's really, yes, 5 will inform you, but the projects would appear at this time to be, okay, we're going to get them done, and we'll budget them next year. And so that's just translates into getting a head start and being more informed. The critical one is 6, because, we really need to do more diligence before we decide we're going to go do a $5 million or $2 million project that's not needed. We really got to spend that money. And it will translate to something. It will translate either to doing the $5 and $2 million project, or it'll translate into let's doing something that's a couple $100,000. Or in case of the one that goes through Turkey Creek and all the way through that piece, that's a pretty big project. The Elm Spring would really, the alternative would be just minor improvements with the low water crossing. So that would be a lot less of a project. So, yes.
Any other questions, comments? Would someone like to make a motion and please include the changes from 6.7 and 6.8? Mike?
Mr. Motion tonight. I move we approve ordinance O-2018-001, amending FY 2017-2018 general fund budget as proposed in Exhibit A, amended by the previous votes that we have taken tonight.
Is there a second? Any other comments? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. The motion carries. Item 6.10, discussion action, approve of ordinance 0-2018-002, creating Chapter 32, Article 5 of the City of Shavano Park Code of Ordinances, regulating the physical use, occupancy, and maintenance of city rights-of-way by small cell wireless network providers. First reading. Bill.
Well, this is coming from left field because you probably haven't even heard about this. Okay, so we received last year actually permit request for Mobilite cell towers, which were these big, ugly, 120-foot cylinders that look very similar to what is right on Huebner Road, right by our water tank. And they wanted to do that right on Lock Hill, Selma, et cetera. And we held on to it, and I just basically called them up and says, I'm not approving this. But they've done this all, they're employing these, Mobilite is this company that's primarily doing this, and there's other providers that are doing this. Ultimately, the Texas legislature in 2017 passed laws that facilitate the access for cellular antenna and related equipment, which they classify as small cell nodes in the city's right-of-ways. Basically, it gives them almost carte blanche to do whatever they want. Obviously, that's a concern to almost every city that's out there. The ability to permit, the ability to regulate is taken, the ability to regulate is largely removed from us. But we have the ability to permit, and we have ability to do quality control and to manage it to some degree. Ultimately, this places us in a position to where we either do something to create terms that we can deal with, or we just let them roll with the flow, and then we are legally not able to do a whole lot. Fortunately, what happened is TML has done some analysis, Texas Municipal League, and they've created a draft template associated with this. A number of cities have passed these ordinances, which almost are identical to ours. Church was the first city to do this. Dan, I don't know if you actually personally worked on this, but our attorney's office also is the attorneys of record for Church. They went through this whole process, and they were the first ones that I'm aware of that passed this. Balcony Heights has done it, looks very similar. And then Almost Park and Live Oak is currently doing this now. Again, they have the ability to put these things on most CPS and utility poles anywhere in the city. So this basically is going to regulate and help us work through and permit do that. So if you've looked at this, this is very technical. It's very technical, and a lot of it, frankly, I'm not an expert in this and I don't understand. I can read through it and I can understand what we're trying to achieve. What we're really trying to do in a nutshell is require them to permit, take a look at where they're putting this stuff and have some say in it, as well as monitoring to make sure that they have employed it correctly. Technically, this will have to be, a permit like this will have to go to the city engineer, who have to look through all the technical stuff and then permit through that. It's going to have some cost associated with it. This also provides permit fees, okay, which is also going to be part of the next agenda item, which is if you approve this ordinance, which establishes permit fees, the next item would be to actually implement a change to the permit fee schedule so that everyone understands what it is. So, again, I'm not trying to make money out of this. We're trying to account for costs associated with this, but potentially, depending on how it's employed, it could be a source of revenue. Just like we receive quite a bit of revenue from the AT&T cell tower that exists on the property that City Hall owns that the fire department right now, several $1,000s a year. This is, depending on how they employ this, offers us the ability to also generate some revenue. If you take a look at where they actually would probably employ it, it'd be on Lock Hill, Selma, Northwest Military Highway, maybe some on Days of All. I don't know that they would do it in the residential areas, but they possibly could. Again, I will tell you this. We got the ordinance from Schertz, Balcony Heights, Alamo Heights. I think they're all three different attorneys that worked on this using, we took all three of those. Shavano Park it. We sent it to our attorney's office. Dan's actually the one that did the review on that. He provided his comments. We did that. Dan asked us to make sure we sent it to the engineer. I did send it to the engineer. Engineer will have to be involved in the permitting process and the costs associated with that. Let's see if the ordinance is it's not relatively simple, but we've added, the important parts are the whereases, which give you a legal piece to that. We've added some of the part in this technical manual, and the technical manual is called a design manual. We've taken some of that would normally not be visible if it's not in the ordinance. We've added some of that back into the ordinance so that there's transparency in our ordinance. You know, you could have a 2-page ordinance that says refer to Annex A, the design manual, and then you have the 20 or something technical pages later on that's not. We've added some of those key things we think into the actual ordinance. So at this point in time, you may or may not have questions. I may or may not be able to answer them. We have been contacted by Mobilite. Get constant invites from Mobilite to attend conferences for how they're going to employ across Texas. I haven't gone, frankly, because I'm busy. I got a lot of other things going on, and when they apply, they're going to apply. I just want to have something that's in place that requires them to permit, and it requires us to do a review, and requires them to provide fees to account for our cost, and that we can go from there. This is a 95% same version that other cities have done. I'll pause there.
Any questions about a motion? Okay.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. I move that we approve of ordinance O-2018-002, creating Chapter 32, Article 5 of the City of Shavano Park Code of Ordinances regulating the physical use, occupancy, and maintenance of city rights-of-way by wireless network providers.
Second. Any further comments?
I just have a couple of questions. Is the engineer that is currently working with Shavano versed in network node situations, or are we going to need to involve some other engineer? I mean, is there some specialty that's needed?
I think Rick Gray is going to do that. Chris, you want to answer that?
Yeah, so Rick Gray in our office does all the reviews, plan reviews and plat reviews for Shavano Park. He is not a network engineer or an electrical engineer. He's a civil engineer just like me. Reading through the design guidance, most of it is, how high off the ground does it need to be? How big can it be? How far can it protrude from the pole? Camouflage, stuff like that. So it's really, we don't have to get into the electronics of it and wireless communications. It's more of the aesthetics of it, and are people going to hit their head on it when they walk by? That's the kind of stuff that we'll be looking at.
Okay, and I guess we can follow what other municipalities have done and what they've seen.
Yeah, I read through the guidelines earlier today, and it's pretty comprehensive. I haven't read what the other cities have done, but from what I understand, it's virtually identical.
Okay. And the only second issue I have is if we don't put a fee structure in place, they're allowed to do it one way or the other. Is that correct?
Yes, the fees are actually established through Chapter 284 of the Local Government Code, maximum fees. So the state's going to control what we can charge anyway.
Okay.
So.
But if we didn't put anything in place, we wouldn't be able to obtain.
They would. That would be my concern, but the amounts are established in the statute, what they would be required.
Okay.
So what we're seeing from mobility is they've made applications in a lot of cities, and for the cities who haven't adopted some version of the model template and the design manual, my assumption is they're getting those installs. Where we have these in place, those permits, like insurance, for example, they've made 2 applications and they've been rejected because I think right now what they're doing is they're kind of testing the waters to see which cities know what they're doing and don't know what they're doing. Because insurance, they were clearly going to be rejected because they were prohibited by the design manual. They were prohibited by the statute where they were trying to locate these, which is near residential areas, near city parks and things such as that. So it's a lot of information what is in your ordinance, but it's designed to keep these away from residential, away from park areas, and in areas where you're already going to have these types of installs in the right of way, the larger utility poles and things such as that. So.
I guess what I'm trying to just clarify is that if we don't put something in place, they can do it anyway.
That's correct.
Okay, and even though we're governed by the government code we can't charge more in fees than what is allowed currently by law. If we don't have anything, they don't have to pay anything.
I believe they would still have to pay you something. What this is doing, typically, the way you regulate all other utilities is through your franchise agreements. What the state has done is they've carved this out, saying the ability for mobile communication to expand across the state is more important than your right to control your right of way. And so we're going to say the state's going to come in and we're going to tell these people they can use your right of way, and we're going to tell you I need to look to see if it's the maximum or the minimum amount that they would have to pay is this. I believe it's a maximum amount that they would have to pay. And that's really what this is all about, is capping the amount that you can charge or recover for the use of your right of way.
Sounds like a legal boondoggle.
Yep. Any other comments? No? Call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. The motion carries. 6.11, fee schedule amendment. Approve ordinance 0-2018-003, amending Appendix A, City of Shavano Park fee schedule to establish small cell network node right-of-way fees, on-site sewage facility fees, and amending EMS fees. This is a first reading. Bill.
So there's three components to this. Obviously, the primary driver of this, frankly, was the previous ordinance, which establishes those fees. And then, okay, if we're going to update this create this ordinance, let's make sure we have our fee schedule squared away. So I think you all know that we collaborate fairly regularly in the staff, believe it or not. Fire and the police and the public works talks, and we all talk about that stuff. And then we plan to update this, and at the same time what we got was some actions that were occurring in the public works and fire concurrently, and so we actually fast-tracked two of these items. So again, it's the three parts are the network provider's access fee we just talked about, the EMS fees, which I'll talk about, and then the septic fees. So I think we've essentially got everything in the box in terms of the network fees. These are the fees that are established already by laws, as the attorney said, but also consistent with previous folks. So the first one I'm going to skip over real quick. I think that one's a done deal. Second, we have not updated our fee schedule for EMS since 2009. We significantly lag in terms of fee recovery from other cities. Did we put the chart from the other cities in here? But it's in your council packet. EMS supplies and the cost to provide EMS services are going up, as all medical services are. And so we have a proposed change, which in some cases is 50% more, some cases it's 100% more in terms of cost associated with that. These costs are in line primarily with the base cost or with San Antonio. In some cases, they're lower than others around the city. In your packet, you've got a number of other cities that Mike Naughton did, Chief Naughton did, in terms of all the specific cities. In this current slide, we have our current price, our proposed price, and the average surrounding area cost. And in some cases, you can see that Advanced Life Support 1, Level 1 resident is proposed to be $950. $939 is the average. Again, I'm not looking to come to City Council every year and updating this. This is right in that average associated with what the cost is, but we're working through that. So Chief can come up and talk specific of these a little bit later on. He can talk all that. The one thing that I do know and I will just say that a lot of these costs are driven by insurance, and even if you have the proposed cost, insurance carriers will only reimburse a certain amount. So Chief can explain that if you have any further questions associated with that. We have a fee that's for extra attendant, but we don't charge that anymore, so we're dropping that as that's proposed. Okay, I'll skip to the next one, and you can come back to EMS as you go forward. Oh, part of the EMS, but also the fire piece, is a response to hazmat. And so, again, we respond occasionally, I think 3 or 4 times a year, to a hazmat that goes out there. There's a fee associated with that if it's resulting from someone that needs to be charged so that we can collect our fees associated with that. Chief can talk that a little bit later on. Next slide. Septic. We currently charge septic based upon, we don't address septic in our fee schedule, but we charge septic fees. And what we've done is we found that we charge more fees than we probably need to be charging in terms of septic fees. So like the roofs, I've come to city council on roofs, and there's several items that we've come in and said, let's lower these fees because we want to be more in line with what the cost is. I mean, some of these costs are intangible. Some of these fees come to us, and they are a source of revenue for the city. But we're trying not to overcharge. In this case, we did some data points. The average septic permit fees for Shavano Park, $642.80. And that's primarily because we treat it as if it's any building construction and if it's any other activity that's going on. Next slide. What we've tried to do is break out what actual costs are and then replicate this based upon cost. Curtis and I put this slide together, and what I'm going to show you is we're proposing a fee that is 400 and, what was it? Here's slide 10. Go back one. Okay, go forward one. What's the fee we're trying to charge here? 410. The way you get the 410 is because there's a permit fee, which is basically, it comes in through, and that's the basic fee that you would come in, you request a permit. Peggy and Marissa and Richard process through that. There is a OSSF plan review fee that's done by our septic engineer. And then different from that, there is a fee that the electrical and the plumbing is actually done by Richard, not by a septic, our medical guy. And there's always a $10 cost to TCEQ. So the OSF plan review and site visits is a direct cost we have every single time. The plumbing and inspection fee at minimum is $50 because there's at minimum one fee and one inspection, and sometimes it's more. The TCU cost is $10, and that's every single time. And the permit fee is the overhead that is associated with the staff doing and processing all the stuff that's going on. So staff believes $410 is a reasonable cost collecting. We collect the costs that we're associated with. It's a reduction in what we typically cost by almost $230. And we can account for each one of those costs associated with it. So again, previously don't have anything in our fee schedule. We just charge the cost of implementing that, which typically cost a lot more. So this will save money for those people that are doing this, but at the same time, it gives us a benefit. So we've covered the network small cell fees, the EMS fees. You may have questions on septic. We have fees on. It's in your packet. This is simply an ordinance that updates that and would propose that. And the fee schedule is the use for citizens and people that are having to pay for the fee, so it's published so they can see in advance what it is, and it's what we charge. So that's our proposal, and subject to your questions and further discussion, I'll pause.
Do we have any questions? Bob?
You showed a slide prior to this on septic fees for a couple other cities. Can you show that right there? So obviously anywhere from 250 or 195 to 300. In your proposal, you show that a $250 charge for that OSSF is the minimum. You say that's a hard cost.
That's what, correct me if I'm wrong, that's what Monty charges us? That's what Monty charges. We have a health inspector, and that includes his plan review, his site visits, his inspections of that. He usually goes multiple, at least 2 or 3 times out to each site. That's our cost to the city that we incur. We pay him in terms of contract.
Why are they to not charge those other 3 cities that you compare? Does that not include that?
No, we don't know that. I think that's what that footnote is. They'll probably either have in-house folks that do that, or they do a
third-party contract that's not included in that fee associated with that. We didn't obviously go to a lot of the cities. We went to a couple. I don't know why you picked those. Who did that, Curtis or Brandon?
Because they had septic.
I did that, and that was the only ones I could find that have septic in our surrounding area.
Okay.
The rest are all in like Saul's wastewater plants.
So I'm guessing maybe that information just like came from a website or,
Yes, ma'am. Came
Okay.
off their city websites.
okay.
Any other questions? Well, I'll just ask why we're increasing. I mean, I know you said it's because I guess you don't want to come back year after year, but we've got some large increases in the EMS fees that,
Chief, come on up here and talk that in terms of,
and can you randomly explain what these people are, these categories?
You bet. The ALS1 is advanced life support, and that is our basic ambulance run that we make. The reason for the increase, we looked at 13 other cities and found their usual and customary cost. They're averaged over there on the sides. The cost for us to deliver this service with medications alone, we can spend $950 on medications without covering any other costs now. As I'm sure y'all know, with the drug shortage and the increase that these medication suppliers are charging us, I mean, some of the drugs we carry are $400 a shot. We don't have any choice but to provide those, and we do go through a substantial amount of drugs. These costs will just help offset the cost. I'll just remind you that these EMS is a fee for use-based service. I mean, y'all provide us to be on duty and all that, but the users of the system are supposed to offset the cost, and that is the cost of us doing business. ALS1 is a standard advanced life support call. That's where you have a paramedic and you hook them to a heart monitor and do that kind of stuff. ALS2 is when you use lots of drugs, ventilate somebody, shock somebody, really serious. There's a set of standards you have to apply. Excuse me. If you administer 3 or more drugs, if the patient's put on a intubated or ventilated, if you defibrillate or cardiovert them, it becomes ALS2. BLS is a basic life support. That's when we put 2 basic EMTs on an ambulance and just run them to the hospital. We don't do that very often. Mileage is the mileage charge per loaded mile. That's once somebody gets in the ambulance and goes from the scene of wherever the call is to the hospital. Aid only, which is probably %50 of the calls we make. That's when we call, come to your house, do whatever we're going to do and leave, and don't transport you to the hospital. That can include medications, cardiac monitors, everything short of transport. And response only is when we come and don't do anything but respond to you. That could be somebody that's fallen out of bed and needs a basic assessment, put back into bed. And then there's a non-resident fee. That was approved in 2009. It's an additional $100 on top of the standard fees.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we need a motion.
Question.
Yes.
Are we going to expect a budget amendment from this on revenues, or how significant is this expected to be, or have we had a chance to do that?
so Chief, tell me again, the insurance role in this and the billing constraints. And so out of the 50% of calls that you might have ALS2 or 1 or 2, and you charge that, I know that you don't always get that. Sometimes you do and sometimes you don't, right? And
correct. So If the person has Medicare, which a lot of our people in Shavano Park do, or a Medicare replacement plan, you're capped. You get what they're gonna pay you, and that's it. You're only allowed to collect so much money from the patient. That holds true for Medicare, military, TRICARE, workman's comp, and some other things. The aid call that's down there that says aid only for the resident, and then the response fees, 95% of that comes directly from those patients' pockets. It's not covered by insurance. Most insurance only covers if you're transported to the hospital. What I will say, because it directly, those numbers will come directly from our residents' pockets. But I'll tell you, that's 1/10 of the cost of going to one of these minor emergency clinics and getting looked at. And I'll remind you that when we come out with an ambulance, we're bringing $400,000 worth of vehicles and equipment. We have the most advanced heart monitoring capabilities there is with telemetry to the hospitals. You're getting high quality stuff. You're getting what you're getting in a standalone free clinic in 3 to 5 minutes at your house.
So to answer your question, Alderman, right now, we're not prepared to do that. Like we did last year, you'll recall, we actually had a little bit of an anticipated surge, and towards the June, July timeframe, because we're trying not to amend the budget too many times of the year, we did come back and said, look, like we're gonna have an increase in EMS fees, but also I think we also had some sales tax. We adjusted that. We'll do that as we need to, if we need to come back, if it's significantly different, if it's a difference significantly.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
So I move to approve ordinance 0-2018-0003, amending Appendix A, City of Shavano Park fee schedule. I'm on the wrong one. Sorry. Approve ordinance 0-2018-003, amending Appendix A. No, I had the right one.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Appendix A, City of Shavano Park fee schedule to establish small cell network node right-of-way fees, on-site sewage facility fees, and amending EMS fees. First reading.
Do I have a second? All right. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. The motion carries. City Manager's report. Is there anyone who wants to discuss any topics? Mike?
On development and court, those costs so far are a bit above what would be expected. 33% of the year and over 40% expenditures. Is there a reason for that bump?
You're talking about financials then? On the financial report?
Roger.
Okay, hang on. Yeah. Right, so what you're talking about, and do you have this chart here, 10, general fund expenditures? It's in the PowerPoint briefing. Off of this, the packet, it's not in your piece. Okay, so in terms of the court, the adopted budget was $81,000. We have spent $33,900, which is 41% of that. One thing we did do was the $4,736 for the metal detector in court. was spent using the court security funds, and that $4,000 was not allocated in the original budget, but we have spent that, and that figure counted against that dollar figure. With this amended budget, that'll add that 4,000, and so that'll make it skewed less. So that's the court. And the other question was? Development services. Well, I can tell you we've had a lot of fees. I mean, those are direct cost expenditures. In other words, whatever we're billed, it's based upon the number of plan reviews and inspections. And so every single month, we have an itemized check request, and it's down to the exact science. And so in this case, I don't see an explanation on this. So let me just go to that here. I'm going to go to that report real quick and see if something jumps out at me here. But this may be the case, and I'm just projecting now, where it just...
Why don't you just follow up with an email to us?
I certainly will.
And save the time here.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments?
Oh, okay, I know the answer to that.
Yes.
In the current period, for example, we billed 2 months to that. I mean, I got a note from Lori that says there's a 2-month billing cycle associated with that, and we also paid for a computer software maintenance, which is an annual thing, or it's $1,400 in that piece. But I will follow up more. I'll send an email, but that's the initial answer.
Thank you. Item 8, consent agenda. All matters listed under this item are considered routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. There will not be a separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired by any alderman on any item, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Does anyone wish to remove an item for discussion? Then I need a motion.
I move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed, same sign. The motion carries.
I would move adjournment.
And so we are.